Chapter 1846. Extortion. A few days later, the Blood Immortal opened his eyes. His eyes were full of joy. With the help of the origin energy, he could see further into the path of cultivation. Originally, the Blood Immortal's cultivation was at the peak of the Earth Immortal realm. Now that he felt the origin energy, although he couldn't directly become a Sky Immortal, he could see the path to becoming a Sky Immortal. He knew what to do. Next, when the time was right, the Blood Immortal would have no problem becoming a Sky Immortal. Boom! Just as the Blood Immortal was immersed in joy, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly burst out from around her. The Blood Immortal's body trembled as she was suddenly hit by this aura. Then, she fell to the ground in a sorry state. She was in an extremely sorry state. Then, the Blood Immortal looked at where the aura came from. He saw that Zhuowen had opened his eyes. His eyes were shining like stars, and his aura was surging to the extreme. He was many times stronger than before. The Blood Immortal stared at Zhuowen and trembled. He couldn't help but whisper, "Mid-stage Sky Immortal?" At this moment, the Blood Immortal was secretly complaining in her heart. Zhuowen's cultivation had increased too quickly. Originally, she had planned to wait until her cultivation had far surpassed Zhuowen's, then she would leave Zhuowen in a carefree manner. But now, not only was Zhuowen's cultivation higher than his strength was also stronger than his. Moreover, Zhuowen's body also contained the origin energy from the origin talisman. He realized that he was really reluctant to leave Zhuowen. After all, the reason why the Blood Immortal was able to cultivate so quickly was largely due to Zhuowen. If it wasn't for Zhuowen's great fortune and continuous fortuitous encounters, the Blood Immortal wouldn't have been able to reach this level. Although Zhuowen had removed the slave seal on the Blood Immortal, if the Blood Immortal just left Zhuowen like this, he would still feel uncomfortable. Zhuowen's face was radiant. The origin energy provided by the complete King Blade Saint Talisman was too rich. After absorbing most of the origin energy, Zhuowen's cultivation base naturally advanced to the middle stage of Heaven Immortal. Although it was extremely difficult to reach the Sky Immortal realm, Zhuowen was different. With the origin energy, he had peeked into all realms below the demigod realm. In other words, the Sky Immortal realm and True Immortal realm were no bottlenecks for Zhuowen. The only obstacle was the accumulation of immortal essence. As long as Zhuowen could accumulate enough immortal essence, he could break through the immortal realm. Zhuowen's origin energy from the King Blade Saint Talisman and turned it into immortal essence. Immortal essence, immortal realm. However, the origin energy was really limited. After pushing Zhuowen's cultivation base to the intermediate Heaven Immortal stage, it was completely consumed. In order to advance to the later stage of the Heaven Immortal realm, the amount of celestial core power or origin energy needed would increase exponentially. Currently, Zhuowen was unable to collect such a huge amount of celestial core power for his breakthrough. Even the immortal crystals in his spiritual ring were not enough. It seems like I'll need at least 1,000,000 immortal crystals or a complete Saint Talisman origin energy to advance to the late-stage Heaven Immortal realm. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and thought of Wei Wuyin of the Beast Envoy clan. This old guy had colluded with He Wushang in the beginning and wanted to kill Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen had also killed Wei Rui and had a deep grudge with Wei Wuyin. Even if Zhuowen did not look for Wei Wuyin would probably look for Zhuowen. Before Zhuowen got most of the topographic maps from Cungjie, Zhuowen didn't have such an idea. But now, with the topographic maps and a general understanding of the topography of the underground, he dared not only to think about it, but also to do it. With that, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and left the exit of the passage. Zhuowen put away the Blood Immortal and the perfect saint being. The underground maze was very large. Zhuowen knew the approximate range of the underground maze and some dangerous places. Zhuowen also knew the exit of the underground maze. However, Zhuowen did not plan to go out now. Instead, he deliberately went to some dangerous places in the underground maze. Maybe he could meet Shiji or the master of the tomb god in the underground maze. Of course, if he met Wei Wuyin or He Wushang, Zhuowen would be more than happy. The underground labyrinth was surrounded by thick rock ramparts. These rock ramparts were scattered all over the place and rotated clockwise. If one were to casually walk in the direction of these rock ramparts, it would be easy to walk into a dead end, or even fall into an extremely dangerous trap. Zhuo Wen flashed through the underground labyrinth again and again. Unfortunately, there were no cultivators in the dangerous places he went. At the corner of a rock wall, there was a large area of quicksand. The quicksand inside was constantly flowing, forming a whirlpool in the center. The whirlpool contained a terrifying suction force. If one accidentally entered the range of the whirlpool, one would definitely be sucked into the whirlpool. At this moment, a huge black coffin was deeply embedded in the quicksand. Due to the huge suction force in the center of the quicksand, the black coffin was constantly floating toward the center of the whirlpool. It would not be long before it was completely sucked into the center of the whirlpool. Not far behind the black coffin, another figure had also sunk into the quicksand. This person's situation was much better than the black coffin's. He was quite far away from the whirlpool, and his celestial origin energy was exceptionally powerful, so his floating speed was quite slow. Zhuowen stopped 500 feet away from the quicksand and silently looked at the black coffin and the figure in the quicksand. According to the information given by Cungjie, this quicksand was called the soul-devouring quicksand. Its suction force was so strong that it could suck in any warrior below the genuine immortal realm. Once someone was sucked into the whirlpool in the center of the soul-devouring quicksand, his soul would be swallowed and his body would be buried under the quicksand, becoming nutrients for the quicksand. Zhuowen was no stranger to the black coffin and the figure. They were the first corpse king of the Serene Corpse Extremity and Konglian Shiren, the ancestor of the blood sacrifice clan. The first corpse king and Konglian Shiren also noticed Zhuowen, who was 150 feet away. The two of them both revealed astonished expressions. They didn't think that the place Zhuowen stood just happened to be outside the range of the soul-devouring quicksand's terrifying suction force. Was it a fluke? Konglian Shiren took a deep look at Zhuowen and murmured in a low voice. The lid of the black coffin opened slightly, and a pair of dark eyes came out. They looked at Zhuowen, who was 500 feet away, with a bewildered expression. "Do the two of you need help?" Zhuowen said with a smile. The first corpse king said gloomily, "With just you? How can you help us? If you have the guts, take another step forward and let me see if you have the ability to help us." Konglian Shiren was silent and looked at Zhuowen quietly. He was very clear that if Zhuowen listened to the first corpse king and took a step forward, then this child would enter the range of the soul-devouring quicksand suction force. At that time, he would be sucked in by the soul-devouring quicksand, and everything would be hopeless. "Sure." Zhuowen smiled faintly and took a step forward. His eyes coldly stared at Konglian Shiren and the first corpse king, unmoving like a mountain. The first corpse king and Konglian Shiren's pupils shrunk as they stared at Zhuowen, who was unmoving like a mountain, revealing an expression of disbelief. Zhuowen was clearly in the range of the soul-devouring quicksand suction force. How could this child not be affected at all? "Take another 30 feet forward," the first corpse king said in a low voice. Zhuowen still had a smile on his face. He took a step forward and walked forward 30 feet in an extremely steady manner. He also clearly felt that powerful suction force, but Zhuowen was still unmoving like a mountain. The first corpse king and Konglian Shiren both gasped, finally believing that Zhuowen was actually unaffected by the soul-devouring quicksand suction force. "How did you do it?" Konglian Shiren finally spoke. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "If the two of you feel that you don't need help, then I'll take my leave." As he spoke, Zhuowen turned around and left this place step by step. However, when Zhuowen was about to leave, the first corpse king said in a low voice, "Wait, we need your help. Can you tell us how to break free from the suction force here?" Zhuowen stopped his footsteps and said with a smile, "Sure, but do the two of you want me to tell you the method like this?" "What do you want?" Konglian Shiren said in a low voice. "I want all the immortal crystals on you," Zhuowen said indifferently. The first corpse king's gaze was cold as he said coldly, "What a big tone, actually wanting all the immortal crystals on us. Are you worthy?" Zhuowen smiled and looked at the first corpse king with ridicule, and said, "This place is called the soul-devouring quicksand. Once someone is swallowed by that whirlpool, their soul won't enter the cycle of reincarnation and will be devoured into nothingness. Your bodies will also be buried at the bottom of the quicksand and become nutrients for the quicksand, never to see the light of day again. If the two of you want to be swallowed by this quicksand and become a lonely ghost, then I have nothing to say. Especially you, First Corpse King. In less than an hour, you'll be swallowed by that whirlpool. Is immortal crystals more important than your life? I think the two of you should know better than me, right? The First Corpse King furrowed his brows, then pondered for a moment and said, "Sure, these are all the immortal crystals on me. Can you help me break free from this quicksand now?" As he spoke, the First Corpse King waved his sleeve and directly threw out a storage pouch. Zhuowen caught the storage pouch and found that there were only 300,000 immortal crystals in this storage pouch. The corner of his mouth was full of a sneer as he said, "The First Corpse King's reputation is illustrious. It shouldn't be this shabby, right? You think it's too little?" The First Corpse King said coldly, "I want all the immortal crystals on you. You only have this one chance, or else don't blame me for not keeping my promise," Zhuowen said coldly. The First Corpse King's expression froze. After a moment of silence, he threw out the storage pouch again. Zhuowen checked it and found that there were 600,000 immortal crystals in this storage pouch. Adding the 300,000 from before as well as the 100,000 on Zhuowen, he had around 1 million immortal crystals on him. Chapter 1847. Late stage of Sky Immortal. Unfortunately, 1 million immortal crystals was not enough for Zhuowen to advance to late stage of Sky Immortal. According to his initial estimation, 1 million immortal crystals was just the foundation to advance to late stage of Sky Immortal. Perhaps he would need several million immortal crystals. 1 million immortal crystals was still too little for the current Zhuowen. "This is all the immortal crystals I have. Now help me get rid of this annoying quicksand," the First Corpse King said gloomily. Zhuowen smiled slightly. He took a step forward with his right foot and quickly approached the soul-devouring quicksand. In an instant, he entered the quicksand's range. Strangely, Zhuowen was not affected by the terrifying suction force of the quicksand. Instead, he stepped on the air like a free bird. The reason why Zhuowen was not affected by the suction force was that he knew the devouring principle of the soul-devouring quicksand from the information given by Zhongjie. The soul-devouring quicksand was unimaginably sensitive to creatures with souls. Any creature that came within 500 feet of the soul-devouring quicksand would be affected by the powerful suction force emitted by the soul-devouring quicksand. If it was a dead creature, the soul-devouring quicksand would turn a blind eye to it. Knowing this principle, Zhuowen completely sealed his sea of consciousness the moment he entered the soul-devouring quicksand. The soul aura inside did not escape at all. That was why the soul-devouring quicksand turned a blind eye to him. Zhuowen naturally would not tell the First Corpse King and Konglin Shuren about this method. Zhuowen rushed to the coffin of the First Corpse King and slammed his right palm on the coffin. A powerful palm force was transmitted, causing the First Corpse King's coffin to suddenly fly up. Afterwards, Zhuowen suddenly kicked with his right foot. The powerful force directly kicked the coffin away, and the First Corpse King, who was inside the coffin, let out a muffled groan. Clearly, the impact had quite a bit of effect on him. When the black coffin flew out 150 meters, the black coffin directly exploded. The First Corpse King who was inside the coffin appeared outside in a rather wretched state. He stared at Zhuowen coldly and said, "You did this on purpose." The First Corpse King's entire body was pitch black, like a dried corpse that had been exposed to the sun for thousands of years. Even his eyes were incomparably empty. In those empty eyes, two strange black flames burned. "I accidentally used a bit more strength. It was unintentional," Zhuowen said indifferently. Zhuowen was very clear that the First Corpse King wasn't a good person. He extorted 900,000 immortal crystals from the First Corpse King. The First Corpse King definitely wouldn't let it go. Therefore, when rescuing this First Corpse King, his methods naturally wouldn't be so gentle. The First Corpse King's eyes were filled with killing intent. He stared fixedly at Zhuowen, then leaned against a nearby cliff, and said, "Little bastard, this Corpse King's immortal crystals aren't so easy to take." At this moment, Konglin Shuren is 2. Zhuowen S. and not far away, The first Corpse King's face stiffened. He coldly stared at Kong Lianshiren and said in a low voice, "Kong Lianshiren, what do you mean?" Kong Lianshiren did not pay attention to the first Corpse King at all. He only looked at Zhuowen indifferently, as if waiting for Zhuowen's reply. Zhuowen shook his head. Kong Lianshiren's face immediately darkened, and he said, "Zhuowen, if you don't have my help, it won't be that easy to get rid of the first Corpse King. You better think carefully." Zhuowen still shook his head. Kong Lianshiren's face became even more unsightly. He coldly snorted and took out a storage pouch from his spirit ring. He threw it to Zhuowen and said, "I hope you don't regret it." Zhuowen sized up the storage pouch Kong Lianshiren gave him. He discovered that there were no less than 1,500,000 immortal crystals inside, making his eyes light up. Silently putting away these immortal crystals, Zhuowen continued, "Senior Kong, other than the immortal crystals, I also want the blood sacrifice holy symbol on you. When the time comes, I will naturally help you get out." Kong Lianshiren felt that he misheard, and hastily asked, "What did you just say?" "I also want the blood sacrifice holy symbol," Zhuowen said indifferently. Boom! A vast aura suddenly erupted from Kong Lianshiren's body. Under the influence of this aura, the surrounding quicksand actually all soared into the sky, forming a terrifying sandstorm. "You're going too far," Kong Lianshiren roared at Zhuowen. Zhuowen stomped his right foot and dodged the surrounding quicksand. He looked at Kong Lianshiren indifferently and said, "Senior Kong, the more you struggle in this soul-devouring quicksand, the more terrifying the suction force from inside will be. If you don't have my help, you will undoubtedly die. You better think carefully." After Kong Lianshiren recovered his senses, he indeed discovered that the surrounding suction force was becoming more and more terrifying. He quickly restrained the aura that erupted from his body. He stared at Zhuowen and said, "You're too greedy. This blood sacrifice holy symbol is my blood sacrifice clan's inheritance for 10,000 years. How can I give it away just like that? Is your life more important or the holy symbol more important? Senior Kong, think carefully." Zhuowen crossed his arms and looked at Kong Lianshiren indifferently. Time slowly passed. After an hour, Kong Lianshiren was only a few feet away from the vortex. In less than 10 breaths of time, Kong Lianshiren would be completely swallowed by the vortex. At this moment, Kong Lianshiren finally experienced the crisis of life and death. Looking at the incomparably deep vortex, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. "I'll hand over the blood sacrifice holy symbol," Kong Lianshiren hastily said. Zhuowen stared at Kong Lianshiren without any action. This made Kong Lianshiren secretly curse Zhuowen's cunning. Helpless, he tapped his forehead and took out the blood sacrifice holy symbol from his sea of consciousness and threw it to Zhuowen. In the face of his clan's inheritance and his life, Kong Lianshiren ultimately chose his life. Receiving the blood sacrifice holy symbol, Zhuowen's eyes were bright and full of expression. He could feel the dense origin energy within the blood sacrifice holy symbol. As long as he absorbed this blood sacrifice holy symbol, coupled with the immortal crystals on his body, he could completely reach the late stage of the sky immortal realm. "Why aren't you saving me?" Looking at the vortex close at hand, Kong Lianshiren hastily shouted. Zhuowen's right hand formed a claw and suddenly grabbed Kong Lianshiren's collar, lifting him upside down. Kong Lianshiren's face flushed red. Zhuowen's posture of lifting him was too shameful. It was as if he was carrying trash and didn't care about his feelings at all. When they were within 500 feet, Zhuowen suddenly swung and directly threw Kong Lianshiren out. Kong Lianshiren's feet repeatedly stepped in the void. Terrifying immortal essence gushed out, and many ripples emerged under his feet. After that, he steadily stopped not far from the first Corpse King, and his eyes were filled with killing intent, staring fixedly at Zhuowen who was opposite him. "Little bastard, you better not come out. Once you come out, I'll definitely pull out your tendons, peel off your bones, and let you die in pain." Kong Lianshiren roared as if he had almost lost his reason. The first Corpse King on the other hand was laughing gloatingly on the side. After Kong Lianshiren recovered his reason, the first Corpse King said, "This little bastard has guts. He actually tricked both of us. He really doesn't know how to restrain himself. After this kid comes out, How about you and I compete to see who will kill this kid first? Kong Lianshiren glanced at the first corpse king indifferently, and said indifferently, "This kid will definitely be killed by me. You have no chance." As he spoke, Kong Lianshiren came to the other side and sat cross-legged on the ground, silently waiting. The first corpse king shrugged, then raised his head to look at Zhuowen. The corner of his mouth revealed a cruel smile. Zhuowen glanced at Kong Lianshiren and the first corpse king indifferently, the corner of his mouth full of a sneer. No matter if it was Kong Lianshiren or the first corpse king, both of their strengths had reached the peak of the Sky Immortal realm. With Zhuowen's current strength, he might be able to contend against one of them. But with both of them attacking together, even Zhuowen would find it somewhat difficult. So, Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry to leave the soul-devouring quicksand. Instead, he planned to absorb the blood sacrifice holy symbol and immortal crystal to break through to the late stage of the Sky Immortal realm. This way, he would have a much greater chance of breaking through the siege of the first corpse king and Kong Lianshiren. Although Zhuowen had the mysterious scabbard, and if he used the mysterious scabbard, he could break through Kong Lianshiren and the first corpse king. However, he wasn't sure that he could kill the two of them. So, he didn't plan to expose the mysterious scabbard. And the underground maze was extremely complicated and mysterious. Without knowing anything, no one could find the exit of the underground maze so quickly. Unless they knew the terrain of the underground maze in advance like Zhuowen, then it would be possible to do so. So, Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry. Zhuowen casually found a place at the edge of the soul-devouring quicksand, then sat cross-legged. At the same time, he took out the blood sacrifice holy symbol and took out the primitive talisman. Using the primitive talisman's ability, he began to absorb the original power of the blood sacrifice holy symbol. While Zhuowen was absorbing the blood sacrifice holy symbol, the blood immortal hiding in the spirit ring kept howling. Zhuowen frowned and released the blood immortal. After reminding her about the characteristics of the soul-devouring quicksand, the blood immortal sat beside Zhuowen and absorbed the original power that was escaping from the surroundings. Looking at the greedy look of the blood immortal, Zhuowen frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. Instead, he began to use the primitive talisman to absorb the blood sacrifice holy symbol. Kong Lianshiren, who was outside the soul-devouring quicksand, naturally noticed this scene. Especially after seeing the blood sacrifice holy symbol, his face became extremely ugly. What is this kid doing? It seems like he's absorbing the blood sacrifice holy symbol. The first corpse king was shocked and doubtful. Kong Lianshiren just noticed Zhuowen's actions. He carefully looked at the primitive talisman in front of Zhuowen. He seemed to have guessed something, and his pupils shrank to the size of needles. Kong Lianshiren frowned and murmured in a low voice, "This kid. It's impossible. This kid can't know this method." Time passed by slowly. After about 10 days, the primitive talisman finally absorbed all of the blood sacrifice holy symbol. The original power of the blood sacrifice holy symbol poured into Zhuowen's body, causing the aura in his body to expand to an extremely terrifying level. It's still a little bit away from the late stage of the fairy immortal realm. It seems like the original power of a complete holy symbol is still not enough. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. He waved his sleeve and immediately took out glittering and translucent immortal crystals from the spirit ring. The immortal crystals exploded into balls of extremely rich immortal core power. The immortal core power turned into a mist that surrounded Zhuowen. Then, the immortal core power mist drilled into Zhuowen's meridians. As the immortal core power mist drilled into Zhuowen's meridians, the aura in Zhuowen's body expanded infinitely. Chapter 1848. Clash Whoosh. When Zhuowen's aura burst out, the countless grains of sand within the soul-devouring quicksand came to a standstill. Moreover, these grains of sand were like ancient beasts as they suddenly rose up, forming an inverted quicksand waterfall. The terrifying suction force in the soul-devouring quicksand also stopped for a moment when the powerful aura burst out. The first corpse king and Kong Lianshiren stood up abruptly. Their eyes were wide open and their faces were full of shock. Kong Lianshiren said with a gloomy look, "Late Sky Immortal Realm? When did this kid's cultivation advance so quickly?" Whether it was the first corpse king or Kong Lianshiren, Both of them felt incredulous. When they were in the chess world where the black and white giant were, Zhuowen was someone that many experts had overlooked. Because at that time, Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the late Earth immortal realm. Anyone present could pinch him to death with a finger. If it wasn't for Zhuowen relying on the first mountain god, Shiji, and the Lord of the Divine Tomb, he wouldn't have been able to live until now. But now, not long after the chess world was broken, this kid's cultivation had already reached the sky immortal realm. Moreover, he was breaking through to the late sky immortal realm. This cultivation speed was really unbelievable. How did he do it? There's a huge gap between the Earth immortal realm and the sky immortal realm. Without more than 1,000 years of accumulation, how could he have succeeded? The first corpse king took a deep breath and murmured. Kong Lianshiren's eyes were gloomy. He stared at the origin talisman between Zhuowen's eyebrows. He thought more clearly than the first corpse king. After all, he had held the blood sacrifice saint talisman for countless years and was extremely sensitive to the aura of the saint talisman. He felt the aura of the ice flame, wind thunder, and King's Blade Saint Talisman in the origin talisman. Among them, the King's Blade Saint Talisman's aura was the strongest. It was almost the same as his blood sacrifice saint talisman. Could it be that He Wushang's King's Blade Saint Talisman was also taken by this kid? Kong Lianshuren murmured gloomily. But soon, his gloominess was replaced by enthusiasm. He never thought that Zhuowen would be able to fuse several saint runes at the same time. Moreover, the fusion of these saint runes could bring such great benefits to cultivators. Kong Lianshiren was very clear that the reason Zhuowen was able to advance so quickly was closely related to the holy talisman. As long as he obtained the origin talisman in Zhuowen's body, then he might be able to directly break through the peak of the heavenly immortal realm and become a true immortal. First Corpse King, how about the two of us join hands to capture this boy? Kong Lianshiren suddenly said to the first Corpse King beside him. The first Corpse King's eyes narrowed slightly. He naturally noticed the fanaticism in Kong Lianshiren's eyes just now, and then he noticed the origin talisman in front of Zhuowen. Although he didn't recognize the origin talisman, he could guess that the reason why this kid's cultivation advanced so quickly was inseparable from the origin talisman. The first Corpse King sneered repeatedly. How could he not guess Kong Lianshiren's thoughts, but he didn't point it out. After all, there was no need for the two of them to fall out right now. Everything would be discussed after capturing that Zhuowen first. It's my honor, the first Corpse King sneered. At this moment, above the soul-devouring quicksand, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, and a terrifying light burst out from his eyes. The late stage of the heavenly immortal realm not only gave him more powerful immortal energy than the mid-stage of the heavenly immortal realm, but also a deeper understanding of the three immortal techniques in his body. No matter if it was the slaughtering finger of the underworld or the Buddha demon transformation, they were all the strongest moves of the peak of the true immortal realm. The power of these two immortal techniques far surpassed the other immortal techniques, and could be considered Zhuowen's strongest moves. Slowly turning around, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren outside. Then he took a step forward, and the aura on his body suddenly erupted. Seeing Zhuowen's action, the first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren's eyes narrowed, but soon the first Corpse King sneered and said, "Brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, you think you have the power to fight against the two of us after breaking through to the late stage of the heavenly immortal realm? Wishful thinking." Zhuowen stepped forward step by step, and the aura on his body became more and more terrifying. It was as if countless volcanoes erupted around his body, sweeping out countless upside-down terrifying cyclones. At the same time, Zhuowen pointed his right hand at the void, and the terrifying immortal energy flowed along his fingertip, and suddenly erupted forward. Then, an incomparably vast mountain fell from the sky. The lone peak doesn't stand alone with the other mountains, and it goes straight into the clouds without stopping. When the lone peak crushed down, Zhuowen took a step forward, and his right foot was like the wind, and heavily kicked the surface of the lone peak. Rumble. Suddenly, the lone peak was like a desolate giant beast, and it charged forward violently. Its power was so terrifying that it seemed to be able to crush all living things into powder. Originally, the first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren didn't care too much, but the moment the lone peak rushed towards them, their faces suddenly became much more solemn. Yin Corpse Curse. The first Corpse King's gaze was solemn, and his right hand formed a seal and pointed out. Suddenly, a rather powerful and vast yin qi swept out between his fingers. This yin qi transformed into countless yin corpses, and immediately blocked in front of the lone peak. Kong Lianshiren also made his move. His right hand formed a claw, and at some unknown time, strange bloody marks actually appeared on his palm. These bloody marks constantly intertwined in his palm. With a claw, the bloody marks wriggled, and an incomparably huge bloody claw was reflected in front of him. With endless slaughter and blood, it heavily slammed on the lone peak. Rumble. The first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren's attacks followed one after another, and heavily landed on the lone peak. Immediately after, the lone peak's forward momentum stopped, and a series of muffled explosive sounds continuously resounded on the surface of the lone peak. Zhuowen's gaze was overflowing with battle intent. His right hand pointed again, and an even more terrifying immortal energy swept out, and all gathered into the lone peak. Then, the lone peak suddenly expanded, and instantly expanded dozens of times, reaching through the sky and the earth, and there was no end in sight. Rumble. Suddenly, the Yin Corpse Curse and the bloody claw directly collapsed. The lone peak was like a hot knife through butter, and suddenly swept in front of the first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren. Kong Lianshiren and the first Corpse King's face were gloomy. This Zhuowen had just advanced to the late stage of the heavenly immortal realm, but he could actually unleash such a powerful strength. It was beyond their expectations. No need to hold back, get rid of him, Kong Lianshiren said in a deep voice. His right foot stepped forward, and his entire person swept out like an arrow leaving the bow. At the same time, he flicked his right hand, and immediately took out an iron umbrella. The surface of this umbrella emitted an extremely terrifying aura. Zhuowen stared at this umbrella, and his pupils shrunk slightly. He knew that this umbrella must be a heavenly saint artifact. In addition, the first Corpse King also grabbed with his right hand, and countless death chi surged out from the first Corpse King's body, and finally condensed into a long scythe in his hand. Slash. The first Corpse King followed closely behind Kong Lianshiren. He waved the long scythe in his right hand, and suddenly slashed out. A huge saber chi swept out violently, and around this saber chi were countless soul shadows. Kong Lianshiren's eyes were even more dignified. He held the iron umbrella in his right hand, and suddenly spun it, and a surge of celestial core power poured into the iron umbrella. Suddenly, the iron umbrella flew into the sky, and transformed into countless umbrella shadows. Countless umbrella shadows densely covered the surroundings, and finally condensed into a huge umbrella shadow that was hundreds of feet long. The umbrella shadow was covered with terrifying spikes, and when it spun, it was like a gear that made a strange creaking sound. Crack. With two heavenly saint artifacts, no matter how powerful the lone peak was, it would still collapse inch by inch. At this moment, Zhuowen had already swept out of the range of the Soul Eater quicksand, and his perfect divine body had completely merged with his original body. Celestial Art asked Buddha. The moment Zhuowen swept out of the Soul Eater quicksand, his figure did not stop at all. His right foot stepped on the void, and his whole body spun like a whirlwind. In the air, he put his palms together, and his whole body shone with Buddha's light. The surging Buddha's light wrapped Zhuowen's whole body, and then a huge ancient Buddha shadow appeared in the void behind Zhuowen. Break. The first Corpse King and Kong Lianshiren's eyes narrowed, and they snorted coldly. They both held their respective heavenly saint artifacts, and used their own powerful moves to attack Zhuowen. Boom. Under the control of Zhuowen, the ancient Buddha shadow suddenly stretched out its right palm, and slapped out. The surrounding space collapsed, and only the endless Buddha's light was left. Bang! The ancient Buddha phantom shone with Buddhist light. Unfortunately, Kong Lianshiren and the first Corpse King's teamwork was not something to be trifled with. The ancient Buddha phantom did not persist for too long, and its surface was filled with dense cracks, finally collapsing with a loud bang. Zhuowen's eyes were as cold as a demon's. The seal on his right hand changed again, and endless demon chi burst out from his body, and his whole body was surrounded by demon chi, like a big demon. Clang! Zhuowen grabbed with both hands, and the demon chi was monstrous, condensing into two demon swords. Zhuowen threw out both swords, and faced the first Corpse King and Kong Lianshuren. Bang! 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 The three of them suddenly exchanged dozens of moves, and each move made an extremely dull sound. Terrifying sparks constantly poured out from the three of them, and it looked extremely dazzling. How is this kid's physical body so strong? The first Corpse King's pupils shrank slightly. Every time the two of them exchanged blows with Zhuowen, the terrifying tremors produced were enough to injure Zhuowen quite a bit. However, Zhuowen's expression did not change during the battle, as if he was scratching an itch. After all, his physical body had reached the perfect saint physique, and just the aftermath of the battle could not have any effect on Zhuowen. Immortal Technique, Corpse King Burial. Immortal Technique, Blood Sea World. The first Corpse King and Kong Lianshuren put away any of their previous contempt. They looked at each other, and no longer held back, and used their strongest immortal techniques. The first Corpse King's right sword finger pointed at the void, and then the long scythe slashed out horizontally. The space in front of it suddenly collapsed, and in the collapsed cave, a huge shadow slowly appeared. The shadow had a head full of grey hair, and the fangs in its mouth were exposed. Its eyes were pitch black, and its whole body was filled with death chi. Kong Lianshuren spat out a mouthful of blood essence. The moment the blood essence was spat out, it expanded infinitely, and finally turned into a boundless sea of blood. Chapter 1849. Crushing Bang. 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 Zhuowen's demonic aura swirled around his body as he crossed his demonic sabers and slashed out. Instantly, a monstrous demonic aura condensed into a huge intersecting saber shadow that soared into the sky. Whoosh! The blood sea surged and rushed over. The huge Corpse King phantom stepped on the blood sea, and in the Corpse King's mouth was a broken sword. Seeing the saber shadow approaching, the Corpse King stretched out his right hand and took out the broken sword in his mouth. He slashed out fiercely, and a soaring sword shadow condensed and shot out like an arrow from a bow. The sword shadow soared through the sky, and wherever it passed, the sea of blood soared into the sky. It brought with it a bloody aura as it landed heavily on the intersecting saber shadow. Bang! The intersecting saber shadow did not last for long and was directly shattered by the sword shadow. Then, it continued to rush forward. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He took a deep breath and formed a seal with both hands. Suddenly, an extremely blazing Buddha's light erupted from his body that was filled with demonic aura. Buddha Demon Transformation. After saying that, the Buddha's light in Zhuowen's body became even more blazing. In the end, it fought against the demonic aura around him. His body was half Buddha and half demon. It was both Buddha and demon, and it looked extremely strange. Zhuowen held the devil saber in one hand and the Buddhist commandment blade in the other. He rushed out like a shuttle, riding the wind and breaking the waves. Bang! Zhuowen's saber slashed at the sword shadow. His body paused for a moment, then he twisted his waist and directly shattered the sword shadow. Then, he rushed directly into the depths of the sea of blood. Stop him! Kong Lianshuren's eyes were dark. After using the Buddha demon transformation, Zhuowen's strength had increased by too much. He actually gave Kong Lianshuren a sense of threat. Thinking of this, Kong Lianshuren took a deep breath and formed a seal with both hands again. The sea of blood immediately surged like a raging beast. Zhuowen, who had rushed into the sea of blood, started to spin. The Buddha's light and demonic aura intersected, forming a black gold storm that shuttled through the sea of blood like a hot knife through butter. Whoosh! The huge Corpse King's eyes flashed coldly. With the broken sword in his hand, he dove into the sea of blood and pounced toward Zhuowen. Slash! Zhuowen, who had the body of the Buddha demon and a perfect holy body, was full of fighting spirit. He had no intention of dodging the phantom of the Corpse King. As the two approached each other, Zhuowen brandished the Buddhist commandment blade in his right hand and fiercely chopped the broken sword in the phantom corpse's hand. Bang bang bang! A terrifying power spread out, and countless terrifying water vortexes began to sweep out from the bottom of the blood sea. These water vortexes were like angry dragons, constantly sweeping out, causing endless tsunamis to rise in the blood sea. At the moment when the Buddhist commandment blade collided with the broken sword, Zhuowen decisively threw out the devil saber in his left hand. The demonic saber turned into a beam of dim light, shuttling through the countless whirlpools in the blood sea, heading straight for the glabella of the Corpse King. Whoosh! The Corpse King's phantom did not expect that Zhuowen would suddenly use this move. He was stunned on the spot. Then, the demonic blade moved as fast as a shuttle and instantly pierced through the Corpse King's forehead. Rumble! The Corpse King did not even have time to react before his glabella was invaded by the demonic aura. Then, his entire body was surrounded by the demonic aura and finally collapsed. The moment the Corpse King's phantom collapsed, Zhuowen let out a muffled groan. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, but he quickly suppressed it. Then, he stepped out, following the rolling blood sea, and violently rushed out. After catching the demonic saber not far from the blood sea, Zhuowen combined the devil saber and the Buddhist commandment blade. The demonic light and Buddhist light combined to form a long saber that was about 10 feet long. The surface of the saber was covered with Buddhist light and demonic light. Buddha demon slash. Zhuowen, who was at the bottom of the blood sea, held the Buddha demon saber in his hand and swung it toward the sky. Suddenly, a saber shadow that seemed to be able to tear the endless void rushed out from the Buddha demon saber. This saber shadow was so huge that it was surrounded by demonic and Buddhist shadows. Whoosh! The Buddha demon blade's shadow appeared, and the sea of blood was directly cleaved into two halves, splitting from the middle. The blade's shadow rushed towards the first Corpse King and Konglian Shiren, while Zhuowen raised the Buddha demon blade and followed closely behind, staring coldly at the two above. This little bastard! The first Corpse King and Konglian Shiren's expression changed slightly at the same time. They looked at each other and held their ascended saint artifacts to meet the Buddha demon saber shadow that rushed toward the sky. The first Corpse King stretched out his withered left hand and lightly touched the long scythe in his right hand. The long scythe's surface was emitting an extremely terrifying aura of death. Konglian Shiren's immortal energy condensed on the iron umbrella. The iron umbrella suddenly expanded to several hundred feet. Then, under Konglian Shiren's control, it suddenly swung downward. Countless white lights swept out like streaks of white hidden weapons. Bang! The first Corpse King and Konglian Shiren's all-out attack was extremely terrifying. Although the Buddha demon saber shadow was terrifying, under the two's joint attack, it still collapsed inch by inch. However, the first Corpse King and Konglian Shiren were not unharmed. After the two of them shattered the Buddha demon saber shadow, they groaned and retreated to the side. Whoosh! Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He stomped his right foot and his speed instantly increased as he rushed toward the first Corpse King. Between the first Corpse King and Konglian Shiren, the first Corpse King's strength dropped a lot due to the broken coffin. Although Konglian Shiren lost the blood sacrifice holy symbol, he still had the strength of a peak sky immortal. Seeing Zhuowen rushing toward him, the first Corpse King's eyes flashed with a cold light. He roared angrily and slashed the long scythe in his hand, waving it toward Zhuowen. Slash! Zhuowen held the Buddha demon saber in his right hand and slashed down. It heavily blasted on the long scythe, and a terrifying air wave spread out from between the two. Zhuowen followed this powerful air wave and immediately separated the perfect saint body. The perfect saint body followed the gap in the air wave and instantly approached the first Corpse King. He fiercely punched and heavily smashed the first Corpse King's chest. The first Corpse King did not expect Zhuowen to suddenly use this move, so he was not prepared at all. Then, Zhuowen directly took advantage of the gap and punched his chest, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, Zhuowen's original body stepped on the 7 stars and instantly rushed in front of the first Corpse King. He slashed down. The first Corpse King looked on helplessly as the blade chopped down on his head and directly split him into two. Zhuowen! At the same time, Konglian Shiren behind him roared angrily and rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen indifferently glanced at Konglian Shiren behind him. The perfect saint body instantly merged with him. He once again slashed horizontally with his blade. This time, he used his strongest power at the moment. The moment the blade slashed out, Konglian Shiren's expression changed greatly. He blocked in front of him with the iron umbrella. With a bang, The iron umbrella in Kong Lianxiren's hand was slashed away. Kong Lianxiren's clothes were all torn. He flew out and heavily smashed into the wall behind him. He stared at Zhuowen in fear. Kong Lianxiren's face was full of disbelief. This Zhuowen had just advanced to the late stage of Sky Immortal. Not only did he block the joint attack of two peak Sky Immortals, he even defeated them so cleanly. Zhuowen indifferently glanced at Kong Lianxiren and the first Corpse King that was constantly squirming and starting to merge. He said indifferently, "Do you still want to kill me now?" At this moment, the first Corpse King had completely merged his body that was split into two. However, his aura was extremely weak. The blade just now had caused too much damage to him. The first Corpse King tightly leaned against the rock wall. His gaze was extremely uneasy as he stared at Zhuowen. That blade just now made him feel the feeling of death. Looking at the first Corpse King and Kong Lianxiren, who were completely silent, Zhuowen sneered and said, "Still not scramming? If you dare to make a move next time, leave behind your worthless lives." Kong Lianxiren and the first Corpse King's complexion alternated between green and white. In the end, they didn't dare to refute Zhuowen. Instead, they left this place dejectedly. Zhuowen indifferently looked at the two people who left. The reason why he didn't kill the first Corpse King and Kong Lianxiren was naturally because these two people were not easy to kill. After all, these two people were peak Sky Immortals. They were experts who had been famous in Middle-earth for a long time. If they really fought with their lives on the line, they were bound to have powerful trump cards. At that time, Zhuowen would probably have to pay a great price to kill these two people. Fighting with his life on the line in this underground maze that was filled with danger really wasn't a wise move. Not far from here, on the mottled rock wall path, two figures slowly walked. One of them had a face full of wrinkles. His eyes were filled with the color of death. His face was even paler and bloodless. This person was only around 40 years old, but he looked about the same as an old man in his 70s or 80s. The other person was around 30 to 40 years old. He had a sturdy build. In front of him was a hunting dog that was half the height of a person. It was constantly sniffing at something on the ground. "Brother Wei, are you sure you can find that little bastard Zhuowen?" The man with a face full of wrinkles said with a gaze full of hatred. The middle-aged man glanced at the man with a face full of wrinkles. After a moment of silence, he said, "Brother don't worry. I'm quite familiar with Zhuowen's presence. This hunting dog is a manifestation of the beast envoy Saint Talisman. Its sense of smell is extremely sensitive. It can find the owner of the scent within 10,000 kilometers. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely be able to recognize these two people. Wasn't the man with a face full of wrinkles, He Wushang, who was almost killed by Zhuowen? At this moment, He Wushang's presence was extremely weak. His cultivation had fallen to the early Sky Immortal stage. All of this was thanks to Zhuowen. Right now, He Wushang only wanted to find Zhuowen and slowly torture him to death. The middle-aged man beside him was naturally Wei Wuyin of the Beast Envoy clan. The reason why Wei Wuyin helped He Wushang wasn't because of their good relationship, but because He Wushang had told him that Zhuowen possessed the source energy formed by the fusion of several saint talismans. This kind of source energy was extremely precious to any cultivator. After all, it could allow one to peek into one's origin and know what to do in the future. This was especially true for celestial saints, as source energy was extremely important to them. After learning from He Wushang that Zhuowen actually possessed such a thing, Wei Wuyin was naturally tempted. Woof! Suddenly, the hunting dog in front of him raised its head and barked. Immediately after, its eyes shone with a dim light and it suddenly flew forward. "Looks like there's a clue," Wei Wuyin said with a blazing gaze. The two of them followed closely behind the hunting dog. The moment they came to a corner, a figure suddenly rushed over. A terrifying aura surged out. The hunting dog let out a wail and was directly crushed by the aura and exploded. Wei Wuyin and He Wushang's expressions changed drastically. They hurriedly used their celestial origin energy to block in front of them and kept retreating. Swoosh! The figure was too fast and caught Wei Wuyin off guard. Before Wei Wuyin could even react, The figure had already arrived in front of He Wushang, who was not far away. "It's you." He Wushang only had time to say these words before a large blade shrouded in black and gold slashed across He Wushang's neck. His head flew into the air. Then, He Wushang's entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. A powerful Buddha demon force invaded his body. The Yuan spirit in his dantian had no chance to escape and directly collapsed. As soon as He Wushang died, Wei Wuin's pupils shrank and he hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he activated the beast envoy Saint Talisman and stared ahead. In the countless clouds of blood mist, a tall and straight young man stood proudly like a pine tree. The young man held He Wushang's head in his hand. Chapter 1850. Escape. How could Wei Wuin and He Wushang compare to Zhuowen in terms of familiarity in the underground maze? When Wei Wuin and He Wushang appeared nearby, Zhuowen had already sensed it. Therefore, he had been lying in ambush nearby. The moment the two of them approached, he would catch them off guard and kill He Wushang instantly. Wei Wuin stared fixedly at Zhuowen and revealed a shocked expression. At this moment, Zhuowen's aura was extremely powerful. If he was not mistaken, Zhuowen's cultivation had already reached the late heaven immortal stage. If he didn't remember wrongly, Zhuowen's cultivation was merely at the advanced stage of the earthly immortal realm. Although He Wushang had reminded him that Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the early stage of the heavenly immortal realm, it was still at the early stage of the heavenly immortal realm. But now, Zhuowen's aura wasn't just at the early sky immortal stage, he was at the late sky immortal stage. In such a short period of time, his cultivation has broken through two minor realms. How did he do it? Wei Wuin frowned slightly. He felt more and more that Zhuowen's aura was strange, but he quickly recalled what He Wushang had said to him before. This kid's rapid advancement is probably related to the origin energy. He's only at the late sky immortal stage, but I'm already at the peak of the sky immortal stage. Coupled with the beast envoy Saint Talisman, he's no match for me at all. Capture him and forcefully extract his origin energy. Wei Wuin's eyes suddenly blazed as he laughed heartily and said, "What a waste of effort. Zhuowen, since you've delivered yourself to my doorstep, don't blame me for being impolite." With that, Wei Wuin stomped his right foot and charged towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen glanced at Wei Wuin indifferently, but he didn't fight Wei Wuin directly. Instead, his figure flashed and he fled towards the back. Although Wei Wuin was also at the peak of the sky immortal stage, he had the Saint Talisman on him and was stronger than Konglian Shiren and the First Corpse King. It wasn't wise for Zhuowen to fight him head-on. Wei Wuin didn't doubt him. In his opinion, Zhuowen's cultivation was lower than his, so killing He Wushang was probably just to vent his anger. He didn't dare to face him at all. The two of them, one chasing and one fleeing, were extremely fast. They arrived at the location of the soul-devouring quicksand in an instant. Zhuowen suddenly stepped into the range of the soul-devouring quicksand. Wei Wuin frowned as he glanced at the constantly flowing soul-devouring quicksand with some apprehension. He could feel that this soul-devouring quicksand wasn't simple, but seeing Zhuowen safely enter the range of the soul-devouring quicksand, he didn't take it too seriously. Whoosh! Wei Wuin stepped into the range of the soul-devouring quicksand. Then, a terrifying suction force suddenly crushed his body. Then, countless grains of quicksand gushed out from the soul-devouring quicksand, forming a huge hand of quicksand in mid-air. As soon as the hand of quicksand was formed, it grabbed Wei Wuin and pulled him into the range of the soul-devouring quicksand. Wei Wuin didn't even resist as his whole body sank into the depths of the quicksand. What's going on? Why are you acting as if nothing happened? Wei Wuin was shocked and angry. He couldn't help but cry out in surprise when he saw Zhuowen strolling in the sky. Zhuowen ignored Wei Wuin's shock. He pointed his right hand at the void and used the Lone Peak Immortal technique. The huge and proud mountain fell from the sky and smashed heavily towards Wei Wuin. Wei Wuin's face was gloomy. He pointed his right hand and a surge of celestial core power gushed out and turned into a huge eagle. The eagle's cry resounded. Then, the giant eagle spread its wings and flew high, knocking the Lone Peak Immortal technique away. Wei Wuyin also found that as he used his celestial core power, the speed of the soul-devouring quicksand increased, and he was getting closer and closer to the vortex in the center of the quicksand. With Wei Wuyin's keen premonition, he could feel that if he was sucked into the vortex, he would be doomed eternally. Zhuo Wen didn't care at all about the lone peak being blasted away. Instead, he pointed his right hand once again, and surging celestial core power entered the lone peak, causing it to expand by tens of times, and rumbling as it pressed down towards the ground. Wei Wuyin's eyes were gloomy. He could only use his celestial core power to resist Zhuo Wen's harassment. Moreover, with Zhuo Wen's harassment, he was getting closer and closer to the vortex in the center of the quicksand. He also knew Zhuo Wen's ultimate goal. Little bastard, I won't let you get what you want. I want you dead. Wei Wuyin's eyes were gloomy. He pointed his right hand at his glabella and immediately summoned the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman. The Beast Envoy Saint Talisman contained countless phantoms of terrifying fierce beasts from ancient times, including the Dao Tai. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Countless phantoms of terrifying fierce beasts swept out and pounced on Zhuo Wen as if they had gone mad. They set off a powerful and terrifying storm in the surroundings, enveloping Zhuo Wen entirely. Seeing Wei Wuyin take out the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman, Zhuo Wen sneered. He had been waiting for the moment Wei Wuyin used the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman. Zhuo Wen pointed his right hand at his glabella and directly took out the primitive talisman. The moment the primitive talisman appeared, the countless phantoms of fierce beasts surrounding Zhuo Wen all screamed in fear and scattered. The Beast Envoy Saint Talisman that was originally floating in front of Wei Wuyin trembled constantly. It faintly showed signs of breaking away from Wei Wuyin's control, breaking through the air and sweeping towards Zhuo Wen. What's going on? Is this guy's talisman the talisman that contains origin energy that He Wushang mentioned? Damn it, this strange talisman is actually beginning to affect my Beast Envoy Saint Talisman. Wei Wuyin's gaze was gloomy. He waved his sleeve, intending to sweep the tottering Beast Envoy Saint Talisman into it. Unfortunately, the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman was already on the verge of going out of control. Just as Wei Wuyin was about to sweep it away, the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman buzzed as it tore through the air and shot towards Zhuo Wen. Bastard! Wei Wuyin roared in anger. He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Looking at the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman that was tearing through the air, Zhuo Wen's gaze was blazing. However, just as the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman was about to reach Zhuo Wen, the space around the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman suddenly shattered. In the shattered space, a hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman. Then, with a violent tug, the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman was pulled into the space. Zhuo Wen's face froze. His gaze was gloomy. He took a step forward and swept towards the space. Then, he threw out a punch, smashing into the space. Rumble. In an instant, the void exploded. Moreover, this kind of explosion was continuous. In an instant, the void within a radius of several hundred feet around the soul-devouring quicksand exploded into countless fragments. Zhuo Wen took a few steps back. Then, he gloomily stared at the surrounding space that was still exploding. He was extremely angry in his heart. From the moment of contact just now, he had already guessed who the owner of the hand was. Among the group of people who had entered this time, only Yang Yi was able to use the power of the void so skillfully. Yang Yi! Zhuo Wen shouted in a deep voice. Crack! The space 150 meters away from the soul-devouring quicksand crumbled inch by inch as a graceful figure slowly stepped out. This person was wearing a devil mask, revealing a pair of eyes that were sizing up Zhuo Wen with ridicule. Two figures silently followed beside Yang Yi. One of them was the goddess of the prophet clan, Yang Tianwei. The other was a burly man with a body like an iron tower. Junior brother Zhuo Wen, it seems that you have obtained a lot of benefits in here. Your speed of advancement is quite fast. Yang Yi said indifferently. Saying so, Yang Yi handed the Orc Envoy Holy Rune to Yang Tianwei behind him. After receiving the Orc Envoy Holy Rune, Yang Tianwei's calm eyes suddenly revealed a blazing color. Then, he directly pressed the Orc Envoy Holy Rune into his forehead. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly became gloomy. The aura on Yang Tianwei's body was extremely familiar to Zhuowen. This aura was the aura of source strength. Obviously, Yang Tianwei should have fused with many saint runes and refined them into origin talismans. This boy also has origin talismans. If I can snatch them, the benefits to me will be endless. Yang Tianwei stared at Zhuowen in front of him with shining eyes. Yang Yi said indifferently, "Don't worry, I'll naturally do what I promised you." Saying so, Yang Yi glanced at the burly man beside him and said, "Capture this boy." The burly man grinned and said, "Don't worry, sir. Capturing this boy is no problem at all." Saying so, the burly man stomped his right foot and suddenly rushed into the range of the soul-devouring quicksand. Whoosh! The moment the burly man rushed into the soul-devouring quicksand, the endless quicksand suddenly surged up and set off a huge river of quicksand like a waterfall. It rushed violently towards the burly man with the intention of dragging him into the depths of the quicksand. The moment the quicksand rushed in front of the burly man, he grinned and suddenly punched out with his right fist. Then, the terrifying quicksand was directly dispersed by this punch, and the terrifying suction force that swept out from the depths of the soul-devouring quicksand was directly dispersed by this punch. Whoosh! However, the quicksand inside the soul-devouring quicksand was really too large. After the waterfall of quicksand was shattered by the burly man, an even more terrifying amount of quicksand suddenly rose up and condensed into an extremely huge hand of quicksand that grabbed the burly man. "What can mere quicksand do to me?" A disdainful voice came from the hand of quicksand. Then, the hand of quicksand directly collapsed into countless fine sand, and the burly man jumped out and rushed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's pupils shrank and he couldn't help but retreat. The burly man gave him a very strong feeling. The suction force of the soul-devouring quicksand didn't have much effect on him at all. This burly man is definitely a true immortal. I must not fight with him. Zhuowen's mind was like countless muffled thunderbolts. Only experts above the true immortal realm could resist the suction force of the soul-devouring quicksand. Seeing that the burly man was destroying the obstruction of countless quicksand step by step and was constantly approaching him, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a decisive look. He stomped his right foot and immediately plunged into the vortex in the center of the soul-devouring quicksand. At the same time, he sealed all the auras related to the soul in his sea of consciousness as if they were dead objects. Zhuowen knew that the soul-devouring quicksand actually treated dead objects as nutrients and basically buried them in the deepest part of the ground. He could use the power of the soul-devouring quicksand to escape underground first. Chapter 1851. Reunion. When the burly man saw Zhuowen take the initiative to enter the central whirlpool of the soul-devouring quicksand, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. He coldly snorted and said, "Even if you enter, you still can't escape." As he spoke, black gas filled the air around the burly man, and his aura increased several times. It was as if some kind of ancient beast had awakened in his body. Bang! 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 The burly man stomped his right foot in the air. Instantly, countless strands of black gas spread out in all directions. In an instant, the entire space where the soul-eater quicksand was located seemed to have become motionless. This strange stillness only lasted for a moment, before the surrounding space began to collapse. The sand within the enormous soul-devouring quicksand exploded, scattering in all directions and scattering in all directions. Pucci. Wei Wuyin, who was originally trapped in the soul-devouring quicksand, was naturally bombarded by this powerful impact. Then, along with the surrounding quicksand, he was suddenly sent flying and heavily smashed into the surrounding rock walls. Wei Wuyin felt as if all the bones in his body had fallen apart. He spat out another mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, fainting. The burly man's strength was too terrifying. He actually directly smashed the soul-devouring quicksand into ruins. Even the terrifying suction force of the central whirlpool was stopped by the burly man's terrifying strength. Whoosh! After doing this, the burly man grinned and stomped his right foot on the central whirlpool. The originally rotating whirlpool directly collapsed, and the burly man directly entered the whirlpool. Hundreds of feet deep underground, countless branches and vines wrapped around Zhuowen. In addition, There were many similar branches and vines in the surroundings. These vines and vines bound the body, and the needle-like roots pierced into the body to absorb the energy in the body. When the branches and vines no longer sank, the branches and vines that wrapped around Zhuowen began to grow countless needle-like roots, wanting to pierce into Zhuowen's body. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had a perfect holy body. His body was as tough as iron and invulnerable. These roots couldn't pierce through Zhuowen's skin at all. Zhuowen's body flickered with a golden light. He raised his hands, and the surrounding vines and vines directly shattered. After the vines and vines were shattered, Zhuowen's right foot stomped on the ground and continued to rush deeper into the soul-devouring quicksand. He remembered that there was a dangerous place not far from the soul-devouring quicksand. That place was even more dangerous than the soul-devouring quicksand. If he wanted to get rid of the burly man, he could only rely on that place. The gap to true immortal is still too big. Zhuowen's S was full of bitterness. Zhuowen's SSSS. So fast. Zhuowen's face was gloomy. He immediately used his path will to support his perfect holy body. He stomped on the ground with his right foot, and the soil in front of him was unobstructed. Zhuowen rushed forward like a flying shuttle. After a while, Zhuowen stomped on the ground with his right foot and rushed toward the top of the soil. He remembered that this was the dangerous place. If this dangerous place couldn't trap the burly man, then Zhuowen really couldn't do anything. Zhuowen suddenly broke out of the ground. In front of him was an extremely wide rocky area. This rocky area was also one of the dangerous places in the underground maze. There were a total of 10 huge mountains in this rocky area. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire rocky area trembled violently. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. He knew that the burly man was chasing after him. He rushed toward the 10 mountains in front of him without hesitation. Not long after Zhuowen escaped, a strong figure rushed out of the soil not far from Zhuowen. It was the burly man. At that moment, the burly man's body was surrounded by a strange black gas, which made his figure look hazy. "You can't escape, little guy." The burly man grinned, but his smile was extremely cold. He stomped on the ground with his right foot, and the entire ground shook. He then chased after Zhuowen. Zhuowen naturally noticed the burly man rushing toward him. His eyes flashed with a cold light. He then jumped into the range of the 10 mountains. Then, he continuously used a mysterious footwork technique inside the 10 mountains. It was as if he was following a certain pattern. He quickly entered the other side of the 10 mountains. At the same time, the burly man had also stepped into the range of the 10 mountains. However, the moment he stepped into the 10 mountains, the entire rocky area trembled again. Creak, creak. Suddenly, the surrounding 10 mountains began to squirm. Countless rocks slid down from the top of the mountains. Then, the 10 mountains all turned into 10 huge stone giants. Each stone giant was thousands of feet tall. In particular, the murderous aura of the stone giants was extremely strong. Even a genuine immortal would be afraid of such a terrifying murderous aura. The moment the murderous aura spread throughout the rocky area, the burly man stopped and stared at the 10 stone giants around him. Did he know in advance that there was a trap here and led me here? But it should be his first time here. How did he know there was a trap here, and how could he avoid such a powerful trap so easily? The burly man stared at the figure in the distance with a puzzled look in his eyes. From the various signs just now, it could be seen that Zhuowen was extremely familiar with the underground maze. It was as if he had entered this underground maze before. Rumble. However, before the burly man could think about it, the surrounding 10 stone giants had already punched him. The terrifying fist wind was like the toughest chain, sealing and consolidating all directions around the burly man. The burly man squinted his eyes and stamped his right foot. Instantly, even more terrifying black gas burst out from his body. The black gas rushed up like water vapor and formed a strange huge shadow. If Zhuowen was still here, he would recognize that this shadow was the original form of the sky worm. Bang! 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 The fists of the 10 stone giants had already arrived and smashed heavily on the huge shadow formed by the black gas. However, The strange thing was that the shadow of the sky worm only twisted slightly. Then, countless black tentacles swept out and entangled the surrounding stone giants. These black tentacles were too powerful. The 10 stone giants struggled with all their might, but they still couldn't break free from the tentacles. Did he escape? Yang Yi and Yang Tianwei slowly swept to the rocky area and asked calmly. The sky worm slowly walked out from the 10 stone giants. The moment he stepped out of the range of the stone giants, the 10 stone giants roared and collapsed into countless gravel like thunder. Countless black gas burrowed back into the skyworm's body, and the skyworm reappeared in the form of the burly man. He said rather shamefully, "My lord, I was careless." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "This is actually a good thing. When I saw the Netherworld Saint Dragon on this boy, I knew that the Fushi Cauldron must be with him. And I can also guess that all of this should be arranged by that old bastard Tsungjie. Now that this boy seems to be so familiar with the underground maze, I'm afraid that he has some connection with Tsungjie. This boy cannot die before he finds Tsungjie." Yang Tianwei glanced at Yang Yi indifferently, but her heart trembled. She finally knew why Yang Yi did not attack together with the skyworm when he was chasing Zhuowen. With Yang Yi's strength and speed, it was actually not difficult for him to intercept Zhuowen in advance, but Yang Yi did not do so. Yang Tianwei was a little puzzled before, but now it seemed that Yang Yi had another purpose. Yang Yi's deep scheming made Yang Tianwei feel a chill in her heart. "Tianwei, calculate the location of the Heavy Shield family's ancestor Dong Fangxin and Eternity family's ancestor Ji Wubing. I'll get the Heavy Shield Saint Talisman and Eternal Saint Talisman for you," Yang Yi said indifferently. Yang Tianwei's expression shook, and she could not hide the excitement in her eyes. She nodded and immediately used the Divination Saint Talisman to calculate the location of Ji Wubing and Dong Fangxin. Swoosh! In a narrow passage, Zhuowen stopped vigilantly. He then looked around and breathed a sigh of relief when he found that the burly man did not chase after him. Yang Yi is really too mysterious. I don't know where he found such a powerful helper. If I want to contend with Yang Yi, I can only find Senior Shiji, the first mountain god, and the Lord of the Divine Tomb. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. He decided to find Shiji and the Lord of the Divine Tomb first, and then go to the underground maze exit together. Although his cultivation base had advanced to the late stage of the Sky Immortal realm, it was still difficult for him to face a true immortal, especially Yang Yi and the burly man. These two were definitely not early-stage true immortals. They should be stronger existences. Although the burly man's body was a heavenly insect, when he was chasing Zhuowen, he did not reveal any heavenly insect aura. It was only after Zhuowen left that the heavenly insect showed its full strength. Taking out the jade pendant Shiji had given him, Zhuowen used the jade pendant as a guide, chose a direction, and rushed away. About an hour later, Zhuowen found Shiji in a corner with a vigilant look. When he saw Zhuowen, Shiji's face was naturally full of excitement. After finding Shiji, the first mountain god followed the aura of the Azure Dragon Palace and found Zhuowen. Of course, when Shiji and the first mountain god sensed that Zhuowen's cultivation base had reached the late stage of the Sky Immortal realm, they were both surprised. Of course, Zhuowen only gave a brief explanation and did not give any details. Although the two of them were puzzled, they did not harp on this topic. After all, this was Zhuowen's own secret. Moreover, Zhuowen also told them about his encounter with Tsungjie, which made Shiji very excited. As for the first mountain god, Zhuowen also found a trace of excitement in his eyes. Of course, the excitement in the first mountain god's eyes only flashed for a moment. If Zhuowen did not pay attention, he would not have noticed it. It seems that the first mountain god is also related to Tsungjie. Zhuowen looked deeply at the first mountain god, and his eyes showed that he was thinking. Chapter 1852. Exotic Beast. Hearing that, Zhuowen nodded. This underground maze was huge. If they were to continue searching, it would take a lot of time. Let's go. Follow me. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he led the first mountain god and Shiji in a certain direction. Following the topographic map given by Tsungjie, he kept moving towards the exit indicated on the map. If one were to look down from above, they would be able to see that the underground maze was in the shape of a ring. Furthermore, each ring was connected to the next. It looked extremely complicated, and Zhuo Wen's group was heading towards the center of these countless rings. Furthermore, each ring of the underground maze had its own corresponding danger zone. The entrance to the next ring was also extremely hidden. It was extremely difficult to enter the deepest ring of the underground maze. If one didn't know the topography of this underground maze beforehand, it would be impossible to enter the deepest inner ring of the underground maze based on one's own guesses. Zhuowen and his group moved very quickly. They smoothly broke through one ring after another and finally entered the deepest inner ring of the underground maze. The inner ring wasn't very big. It was only about a few 100 feet. It was surrounded by ring-shaped rock walls. The ground was paved with white marble. In the center of the inner ring stood a rather large altar made of white jade. At this moment, a white flame was burning on top of the altar. Is this the exit? Gazing at the altar in front of him, Shiji's gaze was solemn. He looked at Zhuowen in front of him with a puzzled expression. Even the first mountain god had the same expression. Zhuowen didn't answer. Instead, he silently walked towards the altar. Cangjie's last words echoed in his mind. Little guy, the way to break out of this underground maze is in the deepest part of the underground maze. In the deepest part of the underground maze, there is an altar. This altar is burning with a white flame. This flame is the energy center of the underground maze. I will teach you a method. This method can help you absorb the energy of this white flame. When the white flame's energy is completely absorbed by you, this white flame will extinguish. At that time, the underground maze will completely collapse and you will leave this underground maze. Zhuowen silently stood in front of the altar. After pondering for a moment, he said to Shiji and the first mountain god behind him, "Both of you, please protect me. This white flame is the key to breaking out of this underground maze. I can't be disturbed during this time." The first mountain god and Shiji looked at each other and nodded. Then, Zhuowen immediately sat cross-legged in front of the altar. According to Cangjie's method, he started forming hand seals with his hands. Zhuowen's hand seals. Zhuowen. And his hands. Zhuowen and Black's Shui Ying. Shui Studio. The whirlpool. Was white the whirlpool? The whirlpool, white was studio. However, the white flame was even stranger. It had been absorbed by the black whirlpool for a long time, but the flame did not show any signs of extinguishing or weakening. It was as if it would never die out. Moreover, to Zhuowen's surprise, as he continued to absorb the white flames, the strange flames were transformed into rich celestial origin energy after passing through the black vortex. The celestial origin energy surged into Zhuowen's body through his meridians and into his dantian. After experiencing this benefit, Zhuowen worked even harder to absorb the white flame on the altar. Time slowly passed. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During these 3 months, the first mountain god and Shiji had been waiting for Zhuowen at this place. The two of them were increasingly curious about the white flame on the altar. Zhuowen had absorbed the white flame for 3 months, but it still showed no signs of extinguishing. In the past 3 months, the situation in the underground maze had changed quite a bit. Relying on Yang Tianwei's prediction ability, Yang Yi and the other two found Dong Fangshan, the ancestor of the Heavy Shield clan, and Ji Wubing, the ancestor of the Immortal clan. Dong Fangshan and Ji Wubing were no match for Yang Yi and the others. In the end, under Yang Yi's coercion, they reluctantly handed over their holy talismans. In the inner ring, the first mountain god and Shiji, who were bored to death, were suddenly startled. They found that the white flame on the altar in the center of the inner ring began to flicker violently, as if it was constantly swaying in the wind and would be extinguished at any time. The flame is going to be extinguished. Shiji's eyes lit up. The first mountain god nodded slightly and stared at the white flame on the altar in front of him. Whoosh! Suddenly, a breeze swept out from Zhuowen's body and brushed past the white flame. The white flame continued to flicker, slowly shrinking, and finally extinguishing. The moment the white flame was extinguished, the entire underground maze shook violently. It was as if something had appeared in the depths of the underground maze. Rumble. Countless ring-shaped rock walls of the underground maze began to collapse and disintegrate, turning into countless rubble and ruins. All the cultivators in the underground maze noticed the abnormality of the underground maze. Their eyes were filled with curiosity, not knowing what was going on in the underground maze. When all the rock walls had shattered, everyone realized that outside the underground labyrinth, there was actually a cloud of black fog that could not be seen clearly. Following that, the underground maze world began to spin, and it spun faster and faster. Everyone felt dizzy in the midst of the spinning. When the spinning sensation finally stopped, everyone realized that they were no longer in the black fog world where the underground maze was, but in a huge cave world. This cavern was extremely spacious. Below the cavern was an endless sea of magma. Above the sea of magma, there were 5 stone pillars that seemed to pierce through the heavens and the earth. At the top of each stone pillar was a round stone platform. Each platform was extremely large, at least several thousand feet wide. At this moment, everyone appeared on one of the huge platforms on top of the stone pillars. Suddenly, Zhuo Wen raised his head and saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. At the top of the 5 stone pillars, there was a huge void space. This void space was very similar to the starry sky outside the heavenly armor continent, but there were some differences. Although there were many stars in the void, they were all dim and lightless, as if they had reached the end of their road. In front of this void space, there was a huge head that was comparable to this void space. The head looked like a dragon, but it was not a dragon. There were 12 huge golden horns on its head, and it looked extremely ferocious. If one looked closely, the head was connected to the void space, and if one looked closely, they would find that the void space's shape was very similar to a huge beast's body. Could it be that this starry void space is the huge beast's body? Zhuowen had an extremely bold guess, but this guess was extremely ridiculous to him. However, the scene in front of him made him think so. It wasn't just Zhuowen. The others more or less had the same guess as Zhuowen. At this moment, the huge beast's right eye slowly closed. The moment the beast's right eye closed, Zhuowen could clearly see that the beast's right pupil was very different from an ordinary eyeball. It wasn't a black eyeball, but a ring-shaped one. Furthermore, it wasn't just a single ring, but a combination of countless rings. Seeing the ring-shaped pupil, Zhuowen couldn't help but associate it with the underground maze. Wasn't that the layout of the underground maze? It was also made up of ring-shaped rock walls. Could it be that the so-called underground labyrinth is this exotic beast's right eye pupil? Was the place we were at just now just within the right eye of the exotic beast? The more Zhuowen thought about it, the more shocked he became. He stared at the beast in the sky, wanting to know where it came from. This beast has been trapped here for who knows how many years, right? It looks like it has fallen. Shiji looked up at the strange beast and murmured in a low voice. At this moment, the Lord of the Divine Tomb also came to Zhuowen's side. As for the Divine Lord Dohua, he came side by side with Elder Jiyu. Behind them were the 4 lords of the battlefield. Yang Yi, the burly man, and Yang Tianwei stood not far away from the Divine Lord Dohua and the others. In addition, Ji Wubing, Dong Fangxin, Wei Wuyin, Konglian Shiren, and the First Corpse King gathered together. The 5 of them were considered the weakest of the 3 parties. If they didn't unite, they really wouldn't have any competition in the depths of the underground. However, Ji Wubing and Dong Fangxin looked at Yang Yi and the others with extremely gloomy eyes. Their holy talismans had been forcibly taken away by Yang Yi. Meanwhile, Wei Wuyin, Konglian Shiren, and the First Corpse King looked at Zhuo Wen with gazes that contained ill intent, but they didn't dare to act rashly. However, Zhuo Wen had already become a force to be reckoned with. Merely the few great true immortal powerhouses by Zhuo Wen's side were enough to make them suffer. Zhuo Wen, don't you think the aura of this beast is very familiar? We met it at the bottom of the black pool. The first mountain god narrowed his eyes and suddenly transmitted his voice to Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed as he carefully observed the huge exotic beast in the sky. He had indeed sensed a familiar aura. His gaze landed on the exotic beast's claws, and a look of understanding appeared in his eyes. It was this beast that had attacked them at the bottom of the black pool. Thinking that even the first mountain god couldn't withstand the might of this beast's claw, Zhuoan became even more vigilant. The reason why the heavenly armor planet is full of vitality in the extraterritorial starry sky is probably related to this beast. The heavenly god Ganji, who invaded the heavenly armor planet, wanted to extract the star core of the heavenly armor planet, but he was injured by a mysterious force. It's probably also because of this beast. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum slowly walked to Zhuoan's side and stared at the terrifying beast with a complicated expression. Everyone was shocked. What the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum said was too shocking. This beast was so terrifying that it could injure a heavenly god. Just how powerful was this beast? Do Hua silently looked at the beast above. He wasn't too surprised by the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum's words because his goal this time was this beast. Chapter 1853. Left eye. What exactly is this exotic beast? Shiji asked, a little puzzled. The master of the Divine Mausoleum shook his head and said, I don't know. I only know that this beast is very powerful and terrifying. Since this beast is so powerful, aren't we in great danger now? Zhuoan frowned and looked very wary. After all, this beast could seriously injure a divine realm expert. This beast is indeed powerful. With its strength, it can kill all of us here. But now, for some reason, this beast is seriously injured and on the verge of death. It has fallen into a deep sleep. If there is no great stimulation, it won't wake up. Suddenly, Do Hua, the divine lord who had been silent, spoke. He looked at the beast above him that was quietly closing its eyes. His eyes were full of passion. You are all sensible people. I can tell you clearly that there are many planets in this beast's body. I guess that these planets were swallowed by this beast. Moreover, this beast's body is like the void. After swallowing the planets, it is like a small starry sky. However, this small starry sky is far inferior to the real starry sky. Its resistance is also much smaller. Divine immortals and above can travel freely in this beast's body. Think about it, even if you haven't reached the divine transformation realm, you can still travel to other planets. Moreover, these planets may have great opportunities. Moreover, if you find a suitable planet that contains a star core, when you become a demigod in the future, you can become a divine realm expert with the star core. At this point, Do Hua, the divine lord, smiled and looked at the people around him silently. Everyone present was a top figure in the central region. Although they hadn't reached the divine transformation realm, after experiencing the catastrophe 10,000 years ago, they all knew that the key to becoming a divine transformation realm expert was the star core. Without the star core, celestial core power couldn't be completely transformed into star god power. This way, they couldn't become a real divine realm expert and would only be a demigod. Back then, Tsang Jie was already a divine realm expert, but he didn't know how to become one. If he had known about it, he would have become a true heavenly god long ago. The heavenly armor planet, on the other hand, was extremely special. The heavenly armor planet should have been formed because of this strange beast. This strange beast had many planets in its body. Back then, the surging immortal energy that surged from the depths of the earth to the heavenly armor continent should also have come from this strange beast. As soon as Do Hua finished speaking, many people's eyes lit up. In their opinion, if they could really find a star core here, it would undoubtedly be extremely beneficial to them. At the very least, it would not be too much of a problem for them to reach the divine transformation stage in the future. Yang Yi glanced at Do Hua indifferently. The corner of his mouth curved into a mocking arc, but he didn't say anything. Whoosh! Do Hua flicked his finger and took out a jade artifact from his spirit ring. This jade artifact was 1/2 meter tall and was made of tremolite nephrite. It was yellowish-green with brown spots and gray spots. At the bottom of the artifact was the shape of a human wearing a crown. The hand was holding a beast. On the beast and the crown, there was a bird standing on one side. As soon as this jade appeared, it exuded a sense of vicissitudes. This jade should be from a very long time ago. It contained the aura of time. After taking out this jade, Do Hua's eyes were extremely solemn. He said in a deep voice, "This jade is called the Jade God Human Bird and Beast Celestial Artifact. It is the most precious treasure left in the chaotic divine temple in ancient times. With this celestial artifact, we can forcibly break open the void body of the beast and make it easy for us to walk in the small starry sky. Everyone, if you want to enter the beast's body, then help me open the passage. What is inside depends on your luck. Then, Dohua's right hand formed a seal. Celestial core power gushed out and fell on the jade. Whoosh! With the support of the celestial core power, this jade artifact suddenly flew into the air. Its surface burst out with a soft jade-colored radiance, and the carvings of a human, a bird, and a beast seemed to have come to life, vivid and lifelike. Behind Dohua, Elder Jiyu and the four lords of the battlefield did not hesitate to transfer their celestial core power into the jade. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and nodded to Yang Tianwei and the big man. The three of them also transferred their celestial core power into the jade. On the other side, the first corpse king, Dong Fangxin, Konglin Shiren, Wei Wuyin, and Ji Wubing looked at each other. Without any hesitation, they imitated Dohua and the others. Could this Dohua be deceiving us? Shiji frowned slightly. The Lord of the Divine Tomb said indifferently, "This jade god human bird and beast celestial artifact is indeed left behind from ancient times. Dohua did not lie to us about this. It's just that whether it was left behind by Lord Tsungjie remains to be seen." With the approval of the Lord of the Divine Tomb, Shiji, Zhuoan, and the others also transferred their celestial core power into the jade in the air. Moreover, Zhuoan found that the moment his celestial core power entered the jade, a rather complicated voice sounded in his mind. These voices were like echoes in an empty valley, constantly reverberating, as if many people were chanting sacrificial texts at the same time. As these voices continued to reverberate in his mind, Zhuoan's body felt light, as if he was about to rise into the sky. Dohua's hands formed a series of seals, and his eyes became particularly dignified. Finally, with a low shout, the jade-colored light on the surface of the jade in the air burst out to the extreme. In the end, a figure with strange patterns all over his body appeared in the void. He was riding on a savage beast, and there was a lively bird in his right hand. The figure gently tossed his right hand, and the nimble bird made a crisp chirping sound, then cut through the void and finally landed on the body of the strange beast in the air. The bird gently flew over the exotic beast's body as if some kind of law appeared where the bird passed. Then, a crack appeared on the exotic beast's body. It was a wound that looked like it had been slashed by a sharp saber. This scar was dozens of feet long, but compared to the huge body of the strange beast, it was insignificant. And the moment this scar was formed, the strange beast's body slowly squirmed and began to repair the huge scar. "Let's go. Let's go in." Dohua's eyes flashed, and then he took a step forward and took the lead to enter the crack. Elder Jiyu and the four lords of the battlefield followed closely behind, and Yang Yi and the other two silently followed behind. "Let's go in too." Ji Wubing, the first corpse king, and the other four revealed a look of excitement, and impatiently turned into 5 long rainbows and drilled into the crack. Although the resistance inside the strange beast's body is much smaller than in the starry sky, we still have to be careful. "Let's go." The Lord of the Divine Tomb instructed everyone and took the lead to fly up, followed by the 4 perfected immortal Dao soldiers. "Zhuoan, you must be careful," Shiji said. Then, he glanced at the first mountain god beside Zhuoan, nodded, and also left. "Zhuoan, aren't you going in?" The first mountain god suddenly turned his head and asked. Zhuoan stared at the strange beast's wound that was gradually recovering, and said in a deep voice, "Do you have a way to slow down the recovery of this strange beast's wound?" The first mountain god took a deep look at Zhuoan, then nodded and said, "Yes, but I need to borrow the time law of the Azure Dragon Hall." Hearing this, Zhuoan rolled up his sleeve, took out the Azure Dragon Hall, and handed it to the first mountain god. The first mountain god took the Azure Dragon Hall and rushed to the wound on the strange beast's body. Then, he pulled out an extremely powerful time law from the Azure Dragon Hall with his right hand, and used it to slow down the recovery of the wound. However, Zhuoan's gaze was not on the first mountain god, but on the strange beast's left eye that had not yet closed. Previously, Tsungjie had given him a topographic map of this place and helped him get out of the underground maze. At that time, although Tsungje's words were vague, he finally mentioned that he was in a place opposite the underground maze. The underground maze was in the strange beast's right eye, and the place opposite the right eye was the strange beast's left eye. Should I enter the left eye to take a look? Zhuowen frowned slightly, and stared at the strange beast's left eye. Coincidentally, Zhuowen noticed that the strange beast's left eye seemed to have moved, and its circular pupil fell on Zhuowen, causing his body to tremble. It was as if countless muffled thunder had exploded in his mind. Deng deng deng. Zhuowen took a few steps back and looked again. However, he found that the left eye was still lifeless, and there were no signs of it moving. Is it my imagination? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Whoosh. At this moment, the first mountain god brought the Azure Dragon Hall to Zhuowen's side and said, I used the time law of the Azure Dragon Hall to slow down the recovery of the wound by dozens of times. Originally, it would only take a few hours for the wound to completely recover. Now, it might take more than 10 days. Thank you. Zhuowen nodded. Why are you not entering the strange beast's body now? The first mountain god asked in a low voice. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the strange beast's left eye again, and he said in a low voice, I am looking for the strongest expert 10,000 years ago, Tsungje. The first mountain god's pupils shrank, and then he said in a low voice, You know where Tsungje is? Zhuowen did not answer, but his right foot stomped, and he flew towards the strange beast's left eye. The first mountain god looked at Zhuowen's movements silently, especially when he saw Zhuowen fly towards the strange beast's left eye. Flying in front of the left eye, Zhuowen quietly looked at the left eye that was bigger than his body. Then, he took out a white crystal from his spirit ring. This white crystal was given to him by Tsungje's shadow. After taking out the white crystal, Zhuowen gently pressed it into the strange beast's left eye. Suddenly, the white crystal entered the strange beast's left eye without any hindrance, and the circular pupil in the left eye began to spin. Whoosh! A suction force suddenly appeared, and it was like a giant hand that grabbed Zhuowen and pulled him into the depths of the left eye. The first mountain god's pupils shrank when he saw this scene, and he also flew into the range of the left eye. Then, he followed the suction force and entered the inner world of the left eye. Chapter 1854. Tsungje in front of Zhuowen, the white crystal emitted a white light, like a guiding light in the dark. Through the white light, Zhuowen's attention fell on the surroundings of the main hall. He discovered that the walls around the main hall were entwined with countless black veins. They were like vines that crawled all over the walls. Looking at the countless black veins around him, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with fear. He was not unfamiliar with these black veins. When Tsungje first appeared in front of him, the surface of the hall he was in was also surrounded by these strange black veins. It seemed that this was the place where Tsungje was trapped. Zhuowen was worried that he could not find Tsungje in these 10 days. Even if he found Tsungje, he was not sure whether he could save Tsungje. After all, when he saw Tsungje, Tsungje was not in good condition. I don't know where Tsungje is trapped in this hall. Zhuowen looked around and found that there were many doors around the hall. These doors were simple in shape and looked exactly the same. It was difficult to tell which one was the real one. Whoosh! Suddenly, the white crystal emitting white light in front of Zhuowen turned into a white shadow and rushed toward the door in front of it. It was so fast that it almost turned into a shadow. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. The white crystal belonged to Tsungje. Since it chose the door in front of him, there must be a reason. Thinking of this, Zhuowen kicked with his right foot and followed the white crystal. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, when Zhuowen arrived at the door in front of him, countless black veins rushed toward Zhuowen like creepers, as if they were trying to stop Zhuowen from entering the hall. Bang! 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 When these black veins rushed toward him, the white crystal in front of him suddenly burst out a blazing white light. The white light was like countless sharp blades, flying in all directions. The converging black veins were sliced into pieces wherever the white light blades passed. Black blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the entire ground black. Whoosh! After the black veins were all destroyed, the white crystal was like a hot knife through butter. It instantly blasted open the door and entered the palace. Zhuowen followed closely behind. Then, the white crystal blasted open palace doors one after another, passing through many halls. It was as if there were countless halls in this space. As he went deeper, Zhuowen realized that the black veins around him were getting stronger and bigger. The white blade emitted by the white crystal was obviously having a hard time cutting through the black veins. After breaking through the 99th palace door, the black veins in front of the 100th palace door were so thick that they were dozens of feet long. Each black vein was extremely terrifying, and their power was much more terrifying than all the previous black veins combined. Zhuo Wen's expression changed when he saw the black veins in front of the 100th Dao Palace. He felt that the black veins were too dangerous. They were almost as dangerous as the dense black veins in the palace where Cungjie had been. The white crystal buzzed incessantly, seeming to be extremely excited. It seems that Cungjie is behind the 100th palace door? Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, the black veins that covered the surface of the palace door rushed out. The black veins that were dozens of feet wide were like ferocious black pythons. They stretched out toward Zhuowen, wanting to swallow him whole. Bang! 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 At this moment, the white crystal emitted an even more terrifying white light. Then, the white light materialized into sharp white blades that shot out in all directions. Whoosh! Whoosh! Countless white blades slammed into the black veins, cutting out black blood. However, the black veins were too thick. The white blades could not cut through all the black veins. Whoosh! 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 The black veins that were covered in black blood broke through the white blade's attack and rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. An extremely strong sense of danger came from his mind. Then, he stomped his right foot and his Dao will spread out as he retreated rapidly. Unfortunately, when he retreated to the end of the palace door, he found that there was no way out. He had walked into a dead end. I can only fight head-on. Zhuowen gritted his teeth and flicked his finger. He immediately took out the mysterious scabbard that he had obtained from Zhonbai's head and threw it forward. Whoosh! The mysterious scabbard was extremely fast. It instantly smashed into the black veins at the front. Then, an extremely vast and terrifying force crushed the black veins into black powder. Moreover, when the black veins at the front were crushed into powder, the black veins that surged from the back exploded into black blood like a domino effect. Looking at the power of the mysterious scabbard, Zhuowen was a little shocked. Although he had used the mysterious scabbard to deal with He Wushang, he knew that the mysterious scabbard was very strong. However, at that time, Zhuowen had only thrown it out casually and did not unleash too much of the mysterious scabbard's power. Now that Zhuowen had the mysterious scabbard for a period of time, he had a general understanding of it. This time, when he used it again, he did not expect the mysterious scabbard to unleash such terrifying power. Whoosh! 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 However, there were quite a number of black veins in front of the hall door. After the mysterious scabbard shattered the remaining black veins, it caused the other black veins to notice Zhuowen. Immediately, an even greater number of black veins suddenly rushed out and rushed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He took the mysterious scabbard with his right hand and threw it out. The mysterious scabbard kept spinning and drew an arc in the air. Bang! 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 The black veins in front of him exploded the moment they came into contact with the mysterious scabbard. Black blood splattered all over the palace, causing a terrifying black rain to fall. Zhuowen followed behind the mysterious scabbard, taking one step at a time toward the palace door. The white crystal also followed closely behind the mysterious scabbard. Countless white blades were formed, destroying the black veins that were coming at them. Boom! Finally, the mysterious scabbard faced the black rain and smashed heavily in front of the palace door. Then, a terrifying explosion sounded. The entire palace door in front of him exploded and instantly collapsed into dust. Through the dust, Zhuowen saw the scene inside the 100th palace door. It was still a palace, but it was much more ancient than the previous 99 palaces. Inside, one could clearly feel the ruthlessness of time. In the center of the palace, there were candles floating. However, the candles were extremely dim, as if they would be extinguished at any time. With the help of the candles, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and looked at the throne in the deepest part of the palace. A figure sat quietly on the throne. The moment the palace door shattered, the figure on the throne slowly raised his head. His eyes fell on Zhuowen as he said faintly, "You have come. Dong. Dong. Dong." The moment Zhuowen stepped through the palace door, he suddenly heard a sound that sounded like a heartbeat. It constantly beat against his eardrums, causing his heart to beat faster involuntarily. It was as if his heart was about to jump out of his body. After entering the hall, he discovered that in addition to the countless black veins around the hall, there were also many bulges. These bulges were like hearts, constantly beating. Moreover, in the process of beating, streams of black blood flowed out. Zhuowen stared at the bulges as an ominous feeling rose in his heart. The aura of these bulges gave him a familiar feeling, but he could not be sure. "Xiao He, is he your master?" Zhuowen was secretly on guard against his surroundings. However, he did not walk into the depths of the palace without permission. Instead, he sent a message to Xiao He. Swoosh! Xiao He flew out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Its gaze fell on the figure on the throne in the depths of the palace. Its breathing was rapid as it said with an excited expression, "Yes, it is my master's aura. However, other than my master's aura, there is another extremely unfamiliar aura on this person." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He stared fixedly at the figure on the throne, but did not act rashly. "Little fellow, your temperament is not bad. Under such circumstances, you are still able to remain calm and distinguish between truth and falsehood. That is commendable. It is not without reason that Taiyu chose you." The figure on the throne struggled for a while, but found that it was impossible to stand up. It could only give up and look indifferently at Zhuowen and Xiao He in front of it. "Master, is it you?" Xiao He trembled all over and asked in a hoarse voice. The figure on the throne trembled all over, but sighed softly and said, "It is me, and it is not me." With that, the figure looked at Zhuowen and said, "Little fellow, come forward. As long as I am awake, the things in this palace will not do anything to you." Hearing this, Zhuowen frowned slightly. After thinking for a moment, he finally decided to go forward and take a look. What the figure said should be true. It should be true that it was Cungjie. When Zhuowen came to the depths of the palace and walked to the front of the throne, his gaze fell on the figure on the throne. Then, his eyes narrowed involuntarily and he gasped. The man sitting on the throne had a withered face, like a mummy. His forehead bone was protruding high, and his eyes were somewhat lifeless. From the outline of the withered man's face, Zhuowen could still see a trace of Cungjie's appearance. However, the change was too great. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to recognize it at all. What shocked Zhuowen even more was that Cungjie's body was rooted by countless black veins. These veins were almost integrated with the meridians in Cungjie's body and could not be distinguished from each other. Zhuowen could see that in the process of the black veins constantly squirming, Cungjie's face would show an extremely painful expression, as if his tendons and bones were being pulled out. Chapter 1855. Devour. The aura of the exotic beast mark on Cungjie's glabella was much more formidable than that of Kong Wen and the black and white giants. When Zhuowen looked at the black exotic beast mark, he couldn't help but hear an earth-shaking roar in his head. It was as if an ancient beast was constantly roaring in his head. Zhuowen took a few steps back and hurriedly moved his eyes away from the black exotic beast mark. He was shaken inwardly. "Master? It's really you, Master. How did you end up like this?" Xiao He's eyes bulged as she asked sorrowfully. Cungjie looked at Xiao He silently and said bitterly, "It's a long story." Then, Cungjie looked at Zhuowen and said, "Kid, since you have the Fushi cauldron, you're the only one who can save me this time." Zhuowen's eyes shrank as he asked in a low voice, "What do you mean? Also, can you tell me what happened to you?" Cungjie took a deep look at Zhuowen and said with a sigh, "Let me tell you. You will know about it sooner or later. Since you can enter the left eye, it means that you've broken through the right eye. You've seen the giant beast in the cave, haven't you?" Zhuowen and Xiao He nodded. That exotic beast with a universe inside was really strange. Sungjie seemed to know it. Actually, I don't know the origin of this beast. But I know that it's called Devour. It's an extremely powerful and rare exotic beast in the starry sky. Its origin has always been mysterious. If this beast is placed outside the starry sky, many almighty experts will crazily fight for it. As you can see, there are many planets in this beast's body. These planets were all devoured by this beast. The structure of this beast's body is similar to the structure of the starry sky. It can accommodate a large number of planets. As this beast continues to grow, its body capacity will also slowly increase. The number of planets it can devour will also become extremely terrifying. The more planets it swallows, the stronger it becomes, and the faster it grows. Our heavenly armor star was formed because of Devour. Our heavenly armor star is located in outer space. The outer space can't produce any living planets. If it weren't for the many planets in Devour's body, the heavenly armor continent wouldn't have such abundant immortal chi, and the heavenly armor star wouldn't have had living creatures. Zhuowen's face changed. He had never thought that the terrifying exotic beast would be called Devour. Moreover, this exotic beast could swallow planets. It should be known that the heavenly armor star and the heavenly armor continent were a whole entity. Even the strongest warriors of the heavenly armor star couldn't escape the restraint of the heavenly armor continent. However, Devour could swallow planets as big as the heavenly armor star. Moreover, he could swallow more than one planet. It was no wonder that Devour could injure heavenly god Ganj with just one move. It seemed that Devour was really powerful. Zhuowen quietly looked at Sungjie and didn't answer. He knew that Sungjie would continue to talk. After all, Sungjie had just introduced Devour's features. He hadn't told him what had happened to him in the past. Then, Sungjie told him what had happened in the past. The process was similar to the image in the black sphere that the master of the divine tomb had given him. Zhuowen already knew what had happened before Sungjie had sealed the passage between the heavenly armor star and the heavenly armor continent. After Sungjie had sealed the passage between the heavenly armor star and the heavenly armor continent, Sungjie was severely injured and fell deep into the ground created by heavenly god Ganj. When Sungjie fell into the deepest part of the ground, he was entangled by some black veins, which then led him into Devour's left eye. Moreover, these black veins burst out from the depths of the ground, rolling up countless corpses of the saints on the ancient battlefield into Devour's body. At that time, I was an arrow at the end of its flight. I thought I would die for sure. However, when I was dragged into Devour's left eye, the countless black veins had given me endless vitality, forcefully reviving me. As you can see, those black veins have fused with me. Speaking of this, Sungjie's eyes were full of vicissitudes. What are these black veins after all? Asked Zhuowen in a low voice. Parasites. They're parasites in Devour's body. I don't know why, but Devour's life aura is getting weaker and weaker. The parasites lurking in Devour's body have become rampant, and they have drilled out of Devour's body. Then, Sungjie's lifeless eyes fell on Zhuowen. Previously, in Devour's left eye, I guess you have also encountered some experts who had participated in the ancient war, right? Zhuowen nodded slightly. He thought of Book Immortal Kong Wen, the black-armored man in the Black Desert, and the black and white giant outside the chess world. They all had the mark of the exotic beast between their eyebrows. He even thought of the exotic beast inside demigod Zhong Bai's head. He knew that the exotic beast was the parasite, but he didn't expect that Devour's parasite would be afraid of the mysterious eyeball. So, what was the mysterious eyeball? Moreover, he vaguely guessed that the different colors of the parasite mark between the eyebrows represented the level of the parasite. The blue mark between Kong Wen's eyebrows should be of a lower level, while the purple mark should be of a higher level. The black mark between Sungjie's eyebrows should be of the highest level, and the parasite it represented should be the most formidable. What can I do to help you? Zhuowen's eyes twinkled as he sighed. Sungjie's eyes twinkled as he said bitterly, there's only one way to save me. You have to find Devour's lava in Devour's body. Only Devour's aura can expel Devour's parasites. Devour has a lava? Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he was surprised. Sungjie nodded and said, I've been trapped in Devour's left eye for 10,000 years. Although my cultivation base hasn't improved, my soul consciousness has been strengthened under my cultivation. I'm afraid it's comparable to the real God realm now. I've used my soul consciousness to observe Devour's body for 10,000 years, and I've found that Devour has a lava. Moreover, I suspect that Devour's life is draining continuously. I'm afraid it has something to do with the lava in its body. At this moment, the adult Devour has reached the end of its road. It can't control the parasites in its body. The parasite in my body is the strongest among all the parasites. It's the king of all parasites. It's impossible for me to expel the parasites with my own power. Speaking of this, Tsangje's eyes looked sorrowful. Moreover, I don't have much time left. When all the candles in the hall are extinguished, the parasites in my body will control me completely. At that time, even Devour's lava won't be able to save me. Xiao He looked at Zhuowen and said, Zhuowen, please save my master. I beg you. Zhuowen's eyes twinkled. He recalled the desire in Do Hua's eyes when Devour's body was opened. He was sure that Do Hua wasn't so eager to enter Devour's body to save Tsangje, but for Devour's lava. If he could get his hands on a powerful creature like Devour and tame it as his mount, he would have no problem traversing the starry sky. Even if his cultivation base hadn't reached the divine transformation realm, he could rely on Devour to injure or even kill heavenly god realm experts. Not only Do Hua, but Yang Yi might also have the same idea. However, Zhuowen couldn't figure out why the Lord of the Divine Tomb and Shiji had also entered Devour. He glanced at Tsangje. Although he had told Shiji about Tsangje, Tsangje hadn't asked him to reveal his location. However, Tsangje's arrangement was somewhat thought-provoking. It's not that I don't want to help. It's just that it's too difficult. Whether it's Do Hua, the four lords of the battlefield, or the Lord of the Divine Tomb, they are all true immortal experts. Although my cultivation base has been greatly improved, I'm still not qualified to compete with them, Zhuowen said awkwardly. Don't worry. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji will help you. Don't worry about that. Additionally, I will also attach my power to you, giving you the strength to fight against a true immortal, Tsangje said. Zhuowen was silent for a moment. Finally, he nodded and said, Okay, I can help you. However, I can't guarantee that I can get Devour's lava. Also, why did you choose me? Because the Fushi Cauldron chose you. Only the Fushi Cauldron can bear my power. Although your body is quite strong, the power of a demigod is enough to make your body explode and die, Tsangje said indifferently. Hearing this, Zhuowen was silent for a moment. Then, he took out the Fushi Cauldron from between his eyebrows. Staring at the Fushi Cauldron, Tsangje's eyes revealed a touch of nostalgia. Then, he gently waved his right hand and took the Fushi Cauldron in his hand. He sighed and said, After so many years, I didn't expect to see the Fushi Cauldron again. How nostalgic. After sighing with emotion, Tsangje's withered right hand pinched his thumb and middle finger and gently touched the surface of the Fushi Cauldron. Immediately, a powerful energy, which made Zhuowen's face change, was transferred into the Fushi Cauldron from Tsangje's right hand. The Fushi Cauldron, which was rusty and broken, began to glow with vitality. The broken surface gradually faded away, and it looked much more dignified and new. About 2 hours later, Tsangje's eyes revealed a tired look. The many candles in the center of the hall were dimmer than when Zhuowen entered the hall. Zhuowen knew that these candles represented the light of Tsangje's life. If these candles were all extinguished, Tsangje's life would come to an end. Chapter 1856. Blood splashing 5 steps. Zhuowen carefully took the Fushi Cauldron from Tsangje with a solemn expression. The Fushi Cauldron had undergone a drastic change from before. Its appearance and aura had become much stronger. Tsangje's power, in particular, was a peak demigod's power. Whoosh! The moment the Fushi Cauldron landed in Zhuowen's hand, a yellow-furred fox leaped out from the cauldron on a divine turtle. The yellow-furred fox stared at Tsangje and asked, My lord, do you know where my master, Fushi, is? Tsangje glanced at Cheng Huang indifferently and said, Your master is now Zhuowen, not Fushi. Cheng Huang was unwilling to give up. Its eyes flickered and it continued to ask, "My lord, I know my master is not dead. Can you tell me about him?" Tsungjie sighed and said, "Fushi is indeed not dead. He gave up the Fushi cauldron on his own accord because he felt guilty and could not bear the responsibility of the past. So, he is no longer your master. Even if you see him, he will not acknowledge you." Cheng Huang trembled and a trace of sadness appeared in its eyes. It said, "It was not my master's fault back then. I can only blame myself for being too weak and causing my master to fail his mission. Everything is in the past. Zhuowen is now the true chosen one. Once the dust has settled on the heavenly armor planet, you will naturally see your master," Tsungjie said with a wave of his hand. Cheng Huang fell silent. It bowed to Tsungjie and re-entered the Fushi cauldron. Zhuowen watched all of this silently. He knew that something must have happened between Fushi and the Fushi cauldron that caused the Fushi cauldron to shatter and Fushi's whereabouts to be unknown. If Fushi is really not dead, then where is he? Zhuowen slowly raised his head with a thoughtful expression. Suddenly, Tsungjie's gaze fell on the mysterious scabbard floating not far from Zhuowen. His eyes were filled with surprise. He said, "Zhanbi's blood splashing 5 steps. Where did you get it?" Since Tsungjie asked, Zhuowen naturally told him the whole story of how he got the mysterious scabbard. After listening to Zhuowen's story, Tsungjie sighed and said, "Zhanbi is a demigod expert second only to me. He is very young and has not practiced for a long time, but he can reach the demigod level. It can be said that he was a real genius in antiquity times." At this point, Tsungjie looked at the mysterious scabbard and continued, "This scabbard has been with Zhanbi since he started practicing martial arts. It has accompanied Zhanbi for countless years. In that era, when Zhanbi was still weak, he was fearless in the face of an expert who was much stronger than him. He drew his sword and killed the expert who wanted to oppress him. That battle shook the entire heavenly armor continent. Zhanbi named the scabbard blood splashing 5 steps. At this point, Tsungjie hooked his right hand and the scabbard uncontrollably flew from Zhuowen to his hand. Then Tsungjie slowly rubbed the bloodstains on the surface of the scabbard. "Zhanbi is the most talented and brave man I have ever seen. The reason why I was able to seal the divine sparring spear was because of Zhanbi's sacrifice. Since you can get Zhanbi's blood splashing 5 steps, it means that you are destined to have this scabbard." At this point, Tsungjie took out a black iron sword from his sleeve. The surface of the iron sword was as smooth as water and emitted a bright light. When Zhuowen's gaze landed on the metal sword, his pupils constricted. He sized up the metal sword for a long time and realized that it was an extremely ordinary metal sword. It was not even a numinous treasure, but was made of ordinary metal. The blood-splashing 5 steps had followed Zhanbi for countless years. It had always been an ordinary scabbard and Zhanbi had never refined it into a powerful spiritual treasure or even a divine weapon. The moment Zhanbi ascended from the true immortal peak to the half-god realm, the scabbard absorbed a strand of star god power from Zhanbi's ascension to the half-god realm. The scabbard underwent a metamorphosis, directly transforming from an ordinary item into a sub-god equipment. At this point, Tsungjie twisted his right hand and held the hilt of the iron sword. He inserted the iron sword into the scabbard accurately. Then Zhuowen clearly felt that the iron sword and the scabbard seemed to have a strange resonance at this moment. With the resonance, a powerful force that made Zhuowen's mind tremble gushed out from the iron sword. Clang! Tsungjie slowly pulled out the iron sword. Zhuowen's face changed slowly, becoming aghast and incredulous. This was because at this moment, the ordinary iron sword had undergone an earth-shattering change the moment it was unsheathed. The originally ordinary blade had become even sharper, even more dazzling, and even more frightening. At the instant the iron sword was completely unsheathed, a sword light that blazed like the sun surged out from the tip of the sword. It stimulated Zhuowen to the point he couldn't help but close his eyes, and it shocked Zhuowen to the point his heart stopped beating. Clang! Tsungjie suddenly put the iron sword back into the scabbard. The sharp and horrible spirit produced at the moment when the sword was pulled out disappeared instantly. The hall returned to tranquility. Is this the real mystery of the blood-splashing 5 steps? The mystery of turning something rotten into something magical? Zhuowen's heart thumped wildly. He stared at the mysterious scabbard in Tsungjie's hand in shock. Zhon Bai only used 5 swords in his life. 1 step represents 1 sword. When he used all 5 steps and 5 swords, he would not attack again. Because victory or defeat had been decided in those 5 steps. That year, when he was fighting with God Ganj, Zhon Bai used the 6th sword, which was the last sword he used at the cost of his life. This sword injured God Ganj. Tsungjie's eyes were full of reminiscence. There was even a touch of admiration in this reminiscence. Zhuowen could not help admiring Tsungjie. Although he had never seen Zhon Bai with his own eyes and had only seen his head, he knew that it required great talent and strength to be able to injure God Ganj in the demigod realm. Zhuowen, take this sword. Tsungjie threw the scabbard and the iron sword to Zhuowen with his right hand. He continued, the limit of the blood-splashing 5 steps is 5 swords. When you want to use the 6th sword, you have to pay with your life. So, don't use the 6th sword unless you have to. Receiving the blood-splashing 5 steps and the iron sword, Zhuowen's eyes became cautious. He nodded to Tsungjie and said in a low voice, predecessor, don't worry. I understand. Rumble. Tsungjie nodded slightly. When he was about to say something, his face changed dramatically. Blue veins bulged on his face as he showed a painful face. At the same time, the terrifying black veins around the large hall began to surge wildly. The large hall also began to tremble violently following the craziness of the black veins. Countless rock fragments fell from the top of the large hall, lifting a terrifying dust cloud. Zhuowen, go quickly. Remember to bring Devao's infant here. I don't have much time left. Tsungjie roared from the throne. He waved his sleeve, and an invisible wind roared. Then, Zhuowen felt his body was as light as a feather as he flew out of the hall. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he was already outside Devao's left eye. After Zhuowen left the hall, a black-cloaked man slowly came to the hall where Tsungjie was. He silently gazed at Tsungjie's ferocious face and said, predecessor Tsungjie, I've come as we agreed. Tsungjie's eyes were sometimes clear and sometimes crazy. The black-cloaked man frowned. I've prepared the thing you want. Take it. Remember, you have to help Zhuowen get Devao's infant. Tsungjie gritted his teeth. He waved his sleeve and handed a black crystal to the black-cloaked man. The black-cloaked man received the black crystal. After observing it for a while, he clasped his fists at Tsungjie. Then, he stomped his right foot and left the hall. Where's the first mountain god? Zhuowen gazed at Devao's left eye, which was about to close. He looked around but didn't see the first mountain god. He knitted his brows. Swoosh. Right before Devao's left eye closed, a figure dashed out of it. Zhuowen fixed his eyes on it and found that it was the first mountain god. The first mountain god glided to Zhuowen, assessing him from head to toe. Then, he looked at the wound on Devao's body and said, Zhuowen, should we enter Devao's body now? Zhuowen gazed at the first mountain god. The first mountain god had entered the left eye with him, but they were separated. Zhuowen thought that the first mountain god would come out earlier than him. He didn't expect that the first mountain god would come out later than him. Although the first mountain god's behavior wasn't suspicious, Zhuowen vaguely felt that the first mountain god had another purpose for entering the left eye. Yeah, let's get in. Zhuowen nodded and didn't say anything. He stomped his foot and dashed into the wound. The first mountain god silently gazed at Zhuowen's back. He squinted and chuckled, this kid has a keen observation. When Zhuowen and the first mountain god entered Devao's body through the wound, they felt as if they had fallen into a swamp. It was as if many invisible forces were squeezing their bodies. It wasn't a pleasant feeling at all. Devao's body is similar to the starry sky. However, the formidable resistance from the starry sky is much smaller. Ordinary warriors at the heaven immortal realm or above can endure this kind of resistance. However, in this environment, their speed will be reduced a lot. The first mountain god's body emitted a dark gold light, making him look like a god of war in golden armor. The formidable pressure around him was instantly offset. Zhuowen had also used his perfect saint body, and he was barely able to withstand the terrifying resistance that was pressing down on him. Zhuowen looked around and found many twinkling stars in front of him. However, most of these stars were dim, like candles in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. Zhuowen didn't hurry to take action. Instead, he used his divine sense to spread out in front of him. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the late stage of the Heaven Immortal Realm and there was a huge gap between him and a true Immortal Realm expert, Zhuowen's divine sense was different. This was because he had the primitive talisman in his sea of consciousness. This primitive talisman contained rich origin energy. By relying on the origin energy, the senses of Zhuowen's soul could reach back to the origin. As a result, the senses of his soul could extend to infinitely far places, just like when he comprehended the Tao intent within the boulder. Chapter 1857. Inside Devaus Bodhizhuowen would not have used this method if he had not been forced to. After all, the origin energy was extremely precious, and the more he used, the less he would have. However, this method was the most convenient and efficient one. The first mountain god also sensed Zhuowen's powerful divine sense, and his eyes revealed a touch of surprise. He did not expect Zhuowen's divine sense to be so terrifying. Zhuowen slightly closed his eyes, and wisps of terrifying divine sense swept out from between his eyebrows, sweeping across the planets in front of him. There were many planets in front of him, and their structures were similar to the heavenly armor planet. There were continent-like creatures on the surface of the planets, but these planets had different colors and shapes. Zhuowen even saw some indigenous creatures on these planets, but these indigenous creatures were extremely weak, and some of them were even on the verge of extinction. The creatures living on these planets struggled as if they were in a swamp, living a life worse than death. Suddenly, Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. In his divine sense, he saw 5 familiar figures on a lush planet quite far away from here. These 5 figures were Wei Wuyin, Konglin Shiren, the First Corpse King, Ji Wubing, and Dong Fangshan. The people who entered Devaus Body were vaguely divided into 3 groups. The 2 strongest groups were undoubtedly the group represented by the Divine Lord Dohua and Yang Yi, and the other group represented by the Lord of the Divine Tomb and Shiji. The third group was formed by Ji Wubing, the First Corpse King, and the other 4. This group was obviously the weakest of the 3 groups, and the strongest among them was Ji Wubing of the Everlasting Family, who was the closest to a true immortal. The gap between them and the other groups was not small. Zhuowen only paid attention to them for a while, and then directly swept past them and continued to move deeper. He knew very well that the place where the Divine Lord Dohua and the Lord of the Divine Tomb were located was the key. Only by finding the place where these 2 groups were, he might be able to find the real location of Devour. Ji Wubing, the first zombie king, and Wei Wuyin, who were originally walking on the planet, changed their expressions drastically the moment Zhuowen's divine sense swept across the planet. What a powerful divine sense! Who was the owner of that divine sense just now? Ji Wubing's expression changed slightly. Not only Ji Wubing, but the other 4 people's faces were also not very good. How powerful did one's divine sense have to be able to transmit it across the sky? Zhuowen's spiritual sense continued to explore. After about an hour, his spiritual sense arrived at the center of this huge space, where there was a yellow planet. This khaki-colored planet was extremely strange. Not only was it located in the center of this space, but Zhuowen also discovered that the area around this khaki-colored planet was a vacuum zone. Around the vacuum zone, there was a circular rock belt. This rock belt flickered with a rather dazzling light, looking rather gorgeous. When Zhuowen's divine sense fell on this khaki-colored planet and was about to enter it, a powerful restriction covered the surface of the planet, preventing Zhuowen's divine sense from exploring. This planet. Zhuowen frowned and revealed a look of surprise when his divine sense was blocked. The first mountain god naturally noticed Zhuowen's abnormality and couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Zhuowen, did you find something?" Withdrawing his divine sense, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, nodded to the first mountain god, and immediately said, "I found a khaki-colored planet in the center of this space. I'm afraid that the Lord of the Divine Tomb and the Divine Lord Dohua should be on this planet." Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered. He knew very well that the only person who could set up such a powerful restriction was the Celestial Saint Master by Do Hua's side, Elder Gu. He dared to conclude that the Divine Lord Do Hua's group was on that planet. If that's the case, let's go. As the first mountain god spoke, the two of them turned into a long rainbow and flew toward the direction Zhuo Wen had pointed out. That's when Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god swept past the planet where Ji Wubing, Wei Wuyin, and the others were, they immediately attracted the attention of the 5 people, causing them to reveal looks of surprise. Zhuo Wen, that little bastard, Wei Wuyin, the first corpse king, and Konglian Shiren looked at Zhuo Wen's figure and gnashed their teeth in anger. However, the 3 of them were extremely wary of the first mountain god by Zhuo Wen's side, so they naturally didn't dare to attack Zhuo Wen now. Let's follow and see. Ji Wubing immediately made up his mind. He left the planet and chased after Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god, while the other 4 looked at each other and followed closely behind. However, the 5 of them didn't dare to get too close. After all, the first mountain god by Zhuo Wen's side was an expert comparable to a genuine immortal. If they got too close and the first mountain god really had evil intentions, they would be in deep trouble. Zhuo Wen naturally saw the 5 people following behind him. The corners of his mouth curled into a sneer, but he didn't pay too much attention to them. The reason why he swept past the planet where Ji Wubing and the others were was naturally on purpose. With the first mountain god by their side, these 5 people would definitely follow them. After all, compared to blindly searching, it would be more convenient to have a genuine immortal like the first mountain god leading the way. The surface of the khaki-colored planet had been set up with a rather powerful restriction formation by the ancient god. If one person were to destroy it, the cost would be quite high. With Ji Wubing and the other 4, he and the first mountain god wouldn't have to waste too much energy. Moreover, the first zombie king, Wei Wuyin, and Konglian Shiren had a lot of grudges with Zhuo Wen. If these 3 people didn't know what was good for them and provoked him after entering the khaki-colored planet, he would settle this grudge once and for all. After a while, the group came to the surface of the khaki-colored planet. Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god stood quietly in front of the planet. As for Ji Wubing and the other 4, they stopped at another place, some distance away from Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god, with vigilant looks in their eyes. Everyone, there are extremely powerful restrictions on the surface of this planet. Only the Celestial Saint Master from the Primal Chaos Temple can set up such restrictions. Zhuo Wen explained. He knew very well that there were some things that didn't need to be said too clearly. He only needed to mention a little, and it would be enough to arouse everyone's imagination. Sure enough, after Zhuo Wen finished speaking, the eyes of Ji Wubing and the other 4 flashed as they stared at the restriction formation on the surface of the planet. Since God Master Do Hua and the others have entered this planet and set up a restriction formation on the surface of this planet, there must be something good inside. We can't let them beat us to it, the first zombie king said gloomily. The others also nodded and looked at Ji Wubing. Ji Wubing pondered for a moment, then cupped his fists to Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god, and said in a deep voice, I'm afraid this planet is not simple. I think the 2 of you also want to enter this place. Why don't you work together to break this restriction formation? The corners of Zhuo Wen's mouth curled up, and he said with a smile, this Shuo has the same idea. I know a little about restrictions. After I find the weakness of this restriction formation, we can work together to break it. With that, Zhuo Wen rushed to the surface of the restriction formation. After circling around it a few times, he pointed at the surface of the restriction formation with his right finger and said in a deep voice, Everyone, let's work together to attack this place. The first mountain god took the lead and rushed out, followed by Ji Wubing and the other 4. The multicolored attacks smashed into the place Zhuo Wen had pointed at. Then, the seals covering the surface of the earthen yellow planet collapsed with countless explosions. Someone broke the restriction formation I set up. Somewhere on a high slope on the khaki planet, Elder Gu, who was following behind the god master Do Hua, frowned and muttered in a low voice. On this high slope, in addition to the god master Do Hua and Elder Gu, there were also the 4 lords of the battlefield, Yang Yi's group, the lord of the divine tomb, and Shiji's group. It should be Zhuoan or Ji Wubing. This is just a small matter. Let's move on. This planet is the central planet of the exotic beast. If I'm not wrong, it must contain the exotic beast's inheritance. I don't think anyone wants to let go of such a thing, Dohua said lightly. Humph. Who knows if what you said is true? Previously, you said that the planet inside this exotic beast's body contained a star core. However, when I checked the cores of several planets, there were no star cores at all, Shiji said with a sneer. Dohua glanced at Shiji and said with a smile, Brother Shi, this is the first time this dough has entered the exotic beast's body. I didn't expect the planets inside to have no star cores. It seems that the star cores of these planets should have been absorbed by the exotic beast in advance. This beast is not a cultivator. It only devours planets to absorb the energy in the planet's star core. It does not refine the star core like human cultivators, allowing the planet to produce endless energy for itself. Although there are many planets in this beast's body, most of them are like abandoned planets, not worth mentioning, the Lord of the Divine Tomb said indifferently. Dohua smiled and said, that's not the point. If everyone can help me open this planet, everyone can have a share of the exotic beast's inheritance on this planet. Everyone smiled faintly when they heard Dohua's words, but they did not answer. Although no one knew what Dohua's purpose was, they could still guess. However, no one pointed it out. After all, before the benefits appeared, they really needed to work together. It was not time to fall out with each other. Suddenly, the jade deity bird artifact in Dohua's hand burst out with a blazing jade light. Then, Dohua's eyes narrowed and he laughed. It seems that our destination is not too far away. Everyone else was stunned as well. Although they did not believe Dohua's words, they were rather convinced by the jade deity's artifact. After all, it was something that had been left behind since the ancient times. It had been around for a long time and was quite famous. Chapter 1858. Immortal Qi and Immortal Crystals. This is. The master of Taiyin stared at the stone pillar in the middle of the open space with a puzzled expression. Dohua stared at the stone pillar in front of him with a burning gaze. He said softly, this place is indeed as recorded in the ancient books in the temple. There is a central stone pillar, and under this stone pillar is the core energy of the strange beast. It also contains the origin of the heavenly armor planet. The immortal Qi on the heavenly armor continent comes from here. In addition, there is also the inheritance of that powerful strange beast. Everyone, lend me a hand. With the jade deity's bird-shaped ritual implement as a guide, we can open this stone pillar. As he spoke, Dohua once again tossed the jade deity human bird-shaped artifact into the air. With a swoosh, the artifact turned into an after-image and swept towards the top of the stone pillar. Instantly, an extremely shocking radiance erupted from the surface of the stone pillar. Extremely terrifying and violent white mist gushed out from the stone pillar and spread in all directions. This is immortal Qi. What rich immortal Qi! The four lords of the battlefield took a deep breath, and their expressions changed. Not only the four masters of the battlefield, but everyone else also looked shocked. There was no other reason than the density of this immortal Qi far exceeded the immortal pool that the Chaos Temple had taken out. The surging immortal Qi soared into the sky and turned into a white pillar that pierced through the sky. The moment this white pillar rushed into the sky, the wind and clouds in the sky began to swirl, and then this immortal Qi spread to the entire planet. The originally khaki-colored planet was full of decadence and desolation, but as the immortal Qi spread throughout the entire planet, the decadent planet slowly glowed with vitality. After entering the khaki-colored planet, Zhuoan and the others suddenly discovered that the originally decadent yellow earth around them had sprouted tender buds, and these buds were growing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, they grew into towering trees. In the blink of an eye, the wasteland with a radius of tens of thousands of feet became verdant and lush with green forests, lingering clouds, and flowing waterfalls. It was like a fairyland. Look over there. Ji Wubing pointed at the white pillar in the distance that shot straight into the sky, his eyes blazing with passion. Not only Ji Wubing, but the others also had the same expression. What rich immortal Qi! What on earth is going on over there? Zhuowen squinted his eyes and exchanged glances with the first mountain god. With a swoosh, he disappeared from where he stood. Ji Wubing and the other 4 gods were not to be outdone. The immortal qi that suddenly spread throughout the entire planet was definitely not for no reason. This must have something to God Dohua and the others. As long as one wasn't an idiot, one would know that there must be a great treasure over there to give off such a strong immortal qi. When Zhuowen's group finally arrived at the spacious area where Divine Master Dohua's group was, they discovered a mysterious stone pillar standing in the middle of the spacious area. Immortal qi was gushing out from within the stone pillar. The arrival of Zhuowen and the others naturally attracted the attention of God Dohua and the others. Among them, God Dohua and Elder Jiyu only glanced at Zhuowen and didn't pay any more attention to him. Among the 4 lords of the battlefield, only the Lord of Taiyin smiled coldly at Zhuowen. The others were expressionless. As for Yang Yi, he had his hands behind his back and didn't look at Zhuowen at all. Instead, he focused all his attention on the stone pillar. The burly man beside him grinned at Zhuowen. Zhuowen stared at the burly man with a solemn expression. This burly man had chased him until he was in a sorry state. Zhuowen and the first mountain god silently came to the side of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji. Their eyes fell on the stone pillar. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum took a deep look at Zhuowen. After a moment of silence, he suddenly transmitted his voice. Zhuowen, that Lord has told you all the important things, right? Zhuowen was silent for a moment and nodded. When Tsungjie said that the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji would help him, he knew that the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji had already contacted Tsungjie. It was just that he had been kept in the dark. Zhuowen, whether we can save Lord Tsungjie or not depends on you, the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum said seriously. Zhuowen took a deep breath and cupped his fists at the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum. He replied, Senior, don't worry. Junior will do his best. After that, Zhuowen looked at the stone pillar again and whispered, Is the thing hidden under this stone pillar the thing that Senior Tsungjie mentioned? The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum nodded. Then, he glanced at Yang Yi and said, If that thing really comes out, you should be careful of Yang Yi, not Dohua. He's not simple. Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. From the tone of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum, Zhuowen could hear a hint of fear. Even the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum was afraid of Yang Yi. It seemed that Yang Yi was not simple. Zhuowen recalled that he had never seen through Yang Yi since the first time he met him. This person was like a cloud of fog. After one layer of fog was removed, another layer of fog would appear. It was as if there was no end to it. Zhuowen even suspected that the name Yang Yi was a fake name. There was no way to know his real identity. Let's work together. The Jade God's bird-shaped celestial device is the key to opening this stone pillar. Only by gathering more power can we completely destroy this stone pillar, Dohua suddenly said to the others. The eyes of the others flickered. They simply poured their power into the celestial device. Because of the precedent of opening Devour's body, they didn't have any difficulty in cooperating. Boom! Not long after, the stone pillar collapsed and turned into dust. Then, a natural abyss was formed at the bottom of the shattered stone pillar. Whoosh! Whoosh! The moment the abyss appeared, several black shadows suddenly rushed out. These black shadows were about the size of a palm. They were so fast that they almost turned into afterimages. Dohua waved his right hand and immediately grabbed one of the black shadows. He flipped his right hand and found a sparkling and translucent crystal lying quietly in his palm. The surface of the crystal was milky white and was dense with extremely powerful immortal qi. Immortal crystal, and it's the best immortal crystal. Dohua's eyes narrowed slightly as he murmured in a low voice. At the same time, more and more black shadows rushed out of the abyss. Each of them represented an immortal crystal. Whoosh! 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 For a moment, the first Corpse King, Ji Wubing, and the others immediately used their movement techniques to collect the immortal crystals that rushed out. Their eyes were full of enthusiasm. Every immortal crystal that rushed out of the abyss was the best immortal crystal. The quality was much higher than the immortal crystals they had obtained in the central region. Not only Ji Wubing and the others, But even the four lords of the battlefield couldn't hold back and used their movement techniques to collect all the immortal crystals that rushed out of the abyss. Then, everyone took action. The Divine Lord Do Hua, Elder Gu, Yang Yi, and the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum also took action. Immortal crystals were too scarce on the Heavenly Armor continent, and these experts whose cultivation had reached the immortal saint level needed the immortal chi in the immortal crystals to cultivate. In addition, the quality of the immortal crystals that rushed out of the abyss was much higher than on the Heavenly Armor continent. No one could remain calm and not fight for them. Zhuowen was naturally in the ranks of those fighting for the immortal crystals. Because Zhuowen was supported by Dao Will, his speed was comparable to that of a true immortal. He was even faster than the four lords of the battlefield, who were early true immortals. At this moment, the Lord of Taiyin rushed in front of a black figure and reached out with his right hand, wanting to grab the black figure. Unfortunately, the moment the Lord of Taiyin extended his right hand, the black figure was already caught by another hand. Then, with a violent tug, the immortal crystal was taken away. The Lord of Taiyin's face stiffened, and his entire body froze on the spot. Then, his expression changed uncertainly. He suddenly looked at the figure that had taken his immortal crystal and said coldly, "Zhuowen?" The person who had suddenly appeared and taken the Lord of Taiyin's immortal crystal was none other than Zhuowen. However, when he felt the cold gazes of the first mountain god and Shiji, the Lord of Taiyin's original desire to attack was finally restrained. Moreover, the Lord of Taiyin was shocked to discover that Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the late sky immortal realm at some point. How did this brat's cultivation advance so quickly? The Lord of Taiyin took a deep breath and calmed down. However, the more he thought about it, the more shocked he became. Zhuowen's speed of advancement was too fast, and it actually made him feel slightly threatened. This time, I must find a chance to completely kill this brat. Otherwise, he'll be a disaster in the future. The Lord of Taiyin's expression darkened as he thought to himself. Then, he rushed toward another immortal crystal that had flown out. Unfortunately, when the Lord of Taiyin was about to approach the immortal crystal, Zhuowen beat him to it again and snatched it away. The Lord of Taiyin clenched his fists and suppressed his anger as he continued to search for the next immortal crystal. In the next dozen or so attempts, the Lord of Taiyin basically didn't get a single immortal crystal. This was because every time he was about to make a move, Zhuowen would always snatch the immortal crystal that caught his eye first. This also caused the Lord of Taiyin to end up with nothing. What infuriated the Lord of Taiyin even more was that Zhuowen's speed was just too fast. He was always able to snatch the immortal crystals before him. Naturally, the scene that the Lord of Taiyin was seen by many people in the surroundings. Their gazes were filled with mockery as they watched the game of cat and mouse between Zhuowen and the Lord of Taiyin. The Lord of Taiyin naturally felt the many mocking gazes directed at him from all around. His face turned pale and green with anger. He almost lost his mind as he roared at Zhuowen, "Little bastard, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Zhuowen stopped not far away from the Lord of Taiyin. He calmly looked at the Lord of Taiyin, who was about to go berserk. He smiled and said, "Yes, I'm doing this on purpose. If you don't want to admit defeat, come and bite me." The Lord of Taiyin's expression froze. Then, his eyes spat fire. In an instant, he threw away all of his rationality and charged toward Zhuowen like a wild beast. Zhuowen calmly looked at the approaching Lord of Taiyin. He didn't retreat or run away. Instead, his gaze was filled with mockery. When the Lord of Taiyin was about to reach Zhuowen, a stalwart figure blocked in front of Zhuowen. Then, this figure violently threw a punch. The wind from the punch was like a dragon. The space exploded as it charged directly toward the Lord of Taiyin's face. The Lord of Taiyin's expression changed slightly. He waved his sleeve and countless yin qi gathered in front of him, forming a yin qi shield. Bang! Chapter 1859. Strange. You're courting death. The first mountain god's eyes were cold as he stepped forward. He didn't give the master of Lunar Master a chance to explain and punched him again. This punch was even more terrifying than the previous one. The Master of Lunar Master's expression changed drastically. In his opinion, the first mountain god was a powerhouse on the same level as Dohua. He didn't dare to fight him head-on. At the thought of this, the Master of Lunar Master suddenly retreated to where Dohua, the Master of Lunar Master, was. When Dohua saw this, he naturally wouldn't ignore it. He pointed with his right finger, and a blazing starlight fell and heavily collided with the first mountain god's punch. Boom! There was a dull explosion, and then Dohua and the first mountain god both took a few steps back. Dohua stared at the first mountain god in shock. Clearly, he didn't expect the first mountain god's combat power to be so terrifying. He couldn't help but say, "Brother, now is not the time for internal strife. When we enter the abyss later, we need to help each other." The first mountain god looked at Dohua with fear but didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly retreated to Zhuowen's side and said calmly, "If the Master of Lunar Master's hands and feet are not clean next time, I don't mind chopping off his hands and feet." The Master of Lunar Master's eyes were gloomy, but he didn't dare to refute. He was indeed not as strong as the first mountain god, but in his heart, he hated Zhuowen even more. This was just a small disturbance. Following that, everyone silently collected the immortal crystals that had been swept out of the abyss. After about an hour, there were no more immortal crystals coming out of the abyss, and the surroundings of the abyss were much quieter. All of them revealed expressions of satisfaction. During this period of time, all of them had gained quite a bit. Most of them had obtained over 1,000 immortal crystals, whereas experts like Dohua and the Master of the Divine Tomb had obtained close to 10,000. This was only the immortal crystals from the abyss. Everyone knew that there must be even more immortal crystals inside the abyss. For a moment, everyone looked at the abyss with burning eyes. This abyss was undoubtedly a huge treasure trove. Everyone, be careful. This abyss isn't as calm as it looks. After Dohua reminded Elder Jiyu, he and Elder Jiyu turned into two streaks of light and directly entered the deep abyss at an extremely fast speed. Yang Yi and the others followed closely behind, followed by the four lords of the battlefield. The Lord of the Divine Tomb, Shiji, Zhuowen, and the others also entered the abyss. The abyss was extremely dark. However, after descending for a few hundred feet, Zhuowen discovered that there was actually a sparkling white light below. At the same time, as they descended, the immortal qi below also became denser and denser. It made people feel relaxed and happy just by smelling it. Everyone continued to dive, and when they reached a depth of 3,000 meters, the lustrous white light had already reached an extremely dense level. Soon after, Zhuowen discovered that the surrounding walls were actually embedded with extremely large immortal crystals. These immortal crystals were no longer the size of a palm. Instead, they were extremely irregular in shape. The smallest among them was the size of a wash basin, while the largest was several zhong in size. It was simply like a huge rock. Dohua, the Lord of the Divine Tomb, and everyone else were stunned as they stared blankly at the immortal crystals scattered all over the walls. They didn't expect there to be so many immortal crystals here. "This is an immortal crystal vein," Dohua murmured in a low voice. The surroundings were very quiet, and one could even hear everyone's suppressed breathing. Such a huge immortal crystal vein was enough to cause countless experts to go crazy over it. After all, such a terrifying immortal crystal vein had never appeared on the heavenly armor continent, not even in ancient times. Moreover, the bottom of the vein was like a bottomless pit, as if there was no end to it. It was enough to show how huge the vein was. Wei Wuyin, Ji Wubing, the first corpse king, Konglian Shiren, and Dong Fengxin's eyes suddenly turned red and crazy. Then, the five of them completely ignored Dohua and the others in front of them and rushed toward the immortal crystals around them. These are all top-grade immortal crystals. One of them is equivalent to several of those immortal crystals on the heavenly armor continent. We're rich. These immortal crystals are enough to help me break through to the true immortal realm. To be able to obtain so many immortal crystals, this trip to the ancient battlefield is worth it. The five of them began to dig the immortal crystals around them with blazing eyes, as if they were crazy. The 4 lords of the battlefield behind Do Hua were also a little restless. If it weren't for Do Hua's silence, the 4 of them would probably have frantically dug out the surrounding immortal crystal veins like Ji Wubing and the other 4. Let's continue. Do Hua glanced at the 5 of them indifferently, and then rushed down. Yang Yi, the other 2, and the Lord of the Divine Tomb followed without hesitation. Although Zhuoan was also very tempted by the immortal crystals around them, he knew that the most precious thing in the depths of the earth was not these immortal crystals, but the infant of Devour that Kang Jie mentioned. He knew very well that once they found the infant of Devour, they would completely fall out with each other. However, before Zhuoan left, he released the perfect saint physique and ordered it to collect as many immortal crystals around them as possible. After collecting enough immortal crystals, he would come back to join them. After diving to a distance of 100,000 feet underground, the number of immortal crystals slowly decreased. At the same time, they reached the bottom, but there was nothing at the bottom. Everyone looked at Do Hua, as if asking for his opinion. Do Hua looked at Goddess Yang Tianwei and said in a deep voice, "Goddess, we are already very close to the inner part of this planet. What should we do next with your divination holy rune?" Yang Tianwei's eyes flickered, and she nodded slightly. Then, she spat out the divination holy rune, and her right hand continuously formed hand seals and pointed at the surface of the divination holy rune. Zhuoan stared at Yang Tianwei silently. He knew that Yang Tianwei had the divination holy rune and could communicate with its power. She had the ability to predict the future. Back then, when he was in the central region, he was limited everywhere. It was probably because of Yang Tianwei's schemes. Suddenly, Yang Tianwei's face changed slightly, and her eyes revealed a painful look. She spat out a mouthful of blood and couldn't help but fall back. Yang Yi stretched out his right hand and hugged Yang Tianwei in his arms. At the same time, a surge of power passed from Yang Yi's palm into Yang Tianwei's body. Yang Tianwei, who was originally pale, looked a little better. Do Hua's eyes narrowed. He looked at Yang Tianwei and said in a deep voice, "Goddess, what happened?" Everyone's eyes gathered on Goddess Yang Tianwei, and they all had different expressions. Yang Tianwei calmed down, and then fear appeared in her eyes. She said in a deep voice, "We can't go any deeper. Just now, I used the divination holy rune's power and used all my strength to predict that there is a hidden power that can destroy heaven and earth. If we go any deeper, I feel that we will all die." Everyone's heart trembled. Do Hua narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "You mean that we still need to go deeper?" Do Hua pointed with his right hand, and a ray of starlight burst out from his fingertip. The ray of starlight condensed to the extreme, and finally formed a large spiral. Do Hua gently pointed forward, and the spiral of starlight turned into a huge whirlwind of starlight that blasted the ground under his feet. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire ground shook violently, and then countless cracks appeared on the ground under everyone's feet. "Are you crazy?" Yang Tianwei's eyes narrowed. She immediately retreated and said, "It's too dangerous down there. I won't go any deeper with you." Yang Tianwei stomped her right foot and flew up. Clearly, she did not intend to participate in this matter. Do Hua did not stop Yang Tianwei from leaving. Since he already knew the answer, it did not affect him much whether Yang Tianwei followed or not. Break. Do Hua stomped his right foot, and the cracks on the ground became denser and denser. In the end, it completely shattered into pieces. Rumble. The moment the ground shattered, a terrifying aura like that of a primeval beast swept out, turning into a destructive storm that swept out from below. Do Hua's eyes narrowed. He stomped his right foot, and starlight covered his body as he tried his best to resist the storm formed by the terrifying aura. The surrounding people also activated their own defenses to resist the terrifying storm. Zhuoan formed a huge gate of reincarnation with the underworld water droplets that surrounded him, resisting the terrifying aura with difficulty. What kind of creature's aura is this? How can it be so terrifying? Zhuoan's face changed slightly, but he soon remembered Cangjie's warning. Could it be that the thing below was really Devour's infant? The aura only lasted for a moment, and then it gradually faded away. Then, a hole appeared below the shattered ground. Whoosh! All of a sudden, Dohua took a step forward and entered the hole. When the others were about to enter the hole, Dohua threw out the Jade Deity Man's bird-shaped celestial device. The celestial device divided into 3 parts. The bird-shaped celestial device let out a clear cry and turned into a giant bird that landed on the other side of the hole. It spread its wings and directly sealed the hole. Dohua's series of actions immediately changed the faces of the 4 lords of the battlefield, while the Lord of the Tomb God and Yang Yi watched this scene quietly. "Senior, what should we do?" Zhuowen asked with a frown. The Lord of the Tomb God shook his head and looked at Elder Ji, who was not far away. Yang Yi also looked at Elder Ji and said indifferently, "Elder Ji, I think you should explain what's going on." Elder Ji narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "I don't know about this. All the ancient books in the Divine Temple are controlled by the Divine Master. I don't know why the Divine Master is doing this, and I don't know what's below." "Still want to quibble?" Yang Yi sneered. The big man behind him also sneered and took a step forward, rushing toward Elder Ji. "Yang Yi, what do you mean? Why don't you go after the Divine Master, but attack me instead?" Elder Gu's eyes were gloomy. He made a series of hand seals. Suddenly, a terrifying mental power burst out and formed a formation in front of him, forming an invisible defensive barrier. Seeing this, the Lord of the Tomb God frowned. Yang Yi's series of actions showed that he was prepared to deal with Elder Ji. Chapter 1860. Giant Claw Rumble. The burly man punched the invisible barrier, causing it to crumble inch by inch and shatter into pieces. Elder Gu's eyes were gloomy as he quickly formed a series of hand seals. Terrifying mind energy surged out and formed a formation diagram in the air. Million formation diagram. Elder Ji pushed his hands forward, and a formation diagram formed by 10,000 strands of mind energy swept out. The burly man laughed sinisterly, and a terrifying black fog gushed out of his body. The black fog condensed into ferocious bone spikes that clashed with the million formation diagram. However, the black fog grew thicker and thicker, and the burly man's figure disappeared. He was almost completely shrouded by the black fog. Whoosh! The black fog suddenly turned into a giant mouth that covered the sky. Under Elder Gu's shocked gaze, it swallowed the million formation diagram along with Elder Ji. The million formation diagram and Elder Ji were swallowed in the blink of an eye. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum, Zhuowen, and Shiji did not even have time to react. By the time they realized what had happened, Elder Ji had already disappeared into the giant mouth. "That's Heavenly Worm." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the giant mouth that had shrunk into the black fog. He could not help but exclaim. No wonder the burly man gave him a familiar feeling. It turned out that he was the incarnation of Heavenly Worm. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum's expression also changed. He stared coldly at the black fog and Yang Yi, and said in a low voice, "Yang Yi, you've got guts. How dare you release Heavenly Worm? Don't you know that Heavenly Worm was one of the disasters from 10,000 years ago?" "I know, but so what?" Yang Yi smiled faintly. "Little guy, we meet again. Back then, you made my clone quite miserable. If there's a chance, I'll settle this debt with you." The black fog churned beside Yang Yi, and a pair of scarlet eyes stared at Zhuowen. A sinister voice slowly rang out, as piercing as an owl's cry. "Since you've released Heavenly Worm, I have no reason not to attack you." The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum had a dark look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the 4 true immortal Dao armaments behind him turned into 4 streaks of light that surrounded Yang Yi and Skyworm. Yang Yi looked around at the 4 true immortal Dao soldiers, then threw his head back and laughed out loud. "For dogs cultivated by Tsungjie, and you, the only disciple of Tsungjie, do you really think you can stop me? Although you're a demigod in name, you're actually just a fake demigod who's occupying the body of the deceased demigod Cao Yu. Fushi, you've already become neither human nor ghost. What's the point of living in this world?" Yang Yi laughed maniacally. Countless gusts of wind swept up around him. These gusts of wind had the power to shatter the void. In an instant, the void around Yang Yi was completely shattered. Then, Yang Yi and Skyworm disappeared into the shattered void. The sacrifice has walked into the trap. What we need to do now is to wait for the real devour to hatch. What's funny is that Dohua thought that the jade god humanoid bird celestial device was the key to devour's lava that Sungjie left behind. He never thought that it was the key to his death. He is destined to be an insignificant sacrifice. When Yang Yi disappeared into the shattered void, an illusory voice came from the shattered void and exploded in Zhuowen's ears. Before Zhuowen could even digest Yang Yi's words, a miserable scream came from below. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with this voice. It was the voice of Dohua, who had entered the underground before. The miserable scream became more and more miserable and loud. Finally, when the scream came to an abrupt end, the entire underground began to tremble violently. Then, countless cracks appeared on the surrounding barrier, as if it would shatter at any time. What's going on? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a touch of horror. Then, he looked at the Lord of the Divine Tomb in front of him and asked in a deep voice, "Senior, are you really Fushi? Was what Yang Yi said just now true?" The Lord of the Divine Tomb fell silent and sighed, "We'll talk about this later. It's not good to stay here for long. Let's leave this place." In the end, we were one step behind. No one expected that Yang Yi would release the heavenly insect, and that Jade Deity Man's bird-shaped magic artifact was actually Yang Yi's secret weapon. I was careless. As he spoke, the Lord of the Divine Tomb opened his arms and a gust of wind swept up from the surroundings. Instantly, Zhuowen, Shiji, and the first mountain god were enveloped in it, and in an instant, they swept toward the top of the cave at an extremely fast speed. Wei Wuyin, Ji Wubing, and the other four, who were originally crazily snatching the immortal crystals above, also sensed the terrifying movement below. Their faces changed slightly, but they suppressed the greed in their hearts and left the cave one after another. As for the four lords of the battlefield, they had long fled upward when they realized that something was wrong. Rumble. Suddenly, from the depths of the underground, a terrifying giant claw that blotted out the sky suddenly stretched out toward the top. Its speed was extremely fast, as if it had transcended time and space. The four lords of the battlefield were too slow. Before they could even react, they were caught by the giant claw and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Even their nascent spirits could not escape. Whoosh! A gust of wind whistled past, and the giant claw followed closely behind. At this moment, Wei Wuyin, Ji Wubing, the first corpse king, Konglian Shiren, and Dong Fangxin had already swept out of the cave and flew into the sky. They stared at the depths of the cave in horror. With their keen senses, they naturally sensed that in the deepest part of the cave, there was a force that could destroy any of them. It was constantly approaching the entrance of the cave. This unknown force made the five of them extremely uneasy. "We can't stay here for long. Let's get out of here quickly." At this moment, another figure swept out of the cave. It was Zhuowen's perfect sacred body. His face was full of fear. Through the perception of his original body, the sacred body naturally knew what had happened underground. "Zhuowen, what's going on down there?" Ji Wubing asked in a deep voice. "If you don't want to die, hurry up and leave. The four lords of the battlefield are dead, and the divine Lord Dohua is also doomed. If you don't leave, I'm afraid you will follow in their footsteps," Zhuowen's sacred body said in a deep voice. "What? The divine lord and the four lords of the battlefield are also dead? How is that possible?" The five people's pupils shrank into needles. They couldn't believe it. The first corpse king's eyes were gloomy as he said, "Nonsense. Whether it is the divine lord or the four lords of the battlefield, they are all true immortals. How could they die? Are you trying to scare the five of us so that you can take the fairy crystals alone? Believe it or not, Zhuowen's sacred body was too lazy to argue with the first corpse king. The first corpse king, Wei Wuyin, and Konglian Shiren suddenly glanced at each other. Then, with great tacit understanding, they rushed toward Zhuowen's sacred body from three directions. As soon as the three of them attacked, they used their most powerful moves, hoping to kill Zhuowen with one blow. Ji Wubing and Dong Fangxin frowned slightly. In the end, they didn't step into the muddy water. Instead, they turned into two long rainbows and left the planet. Their intuition told them that the planet was now very dangerous and they couldn't stay for long. Zhuowen's sacred body stared at the first corpse king, Wei Wuyin, and Konglian Shiren. His eyes were full of killing intent. Zhuowen had kindly reminded the three of them, but the three of them didn't know what was good for them and wanted to kill Zhuowen. Zhuowen, I have always remembered the hatred in the underground maze. Today, I will take your dog life, the first corpse king said with a ferocious face. With the three of us working together, you are dead meat, Wei Wuyin said with a murderous look. Konglian Shiren was silent, but from his sneer, it could be seen that he had the same idea as the first corpse king and Wei Wuyin. The three of them came at an extremely tricky angle, blocking all of Zhuowen's escape routes. Zhuowen could only face the three of them head-on. Zhuowen took a deep breath, and his whole body flashed with a dark golden light. His right hand continued to slide in front of him, instantly drawing 9 golden runes. Then, Zhuowen punched the 9 golden runes, and the 9 golden runes turned into 9 golden dragons. They rushed toward Wei Wuyin and the others with the momentum of 9 dragons swallowing a pearl. It's useless. After all, your doppelganger is weaker than your original body. Even if your original body came, I'm afraid you can't stop the three of us working together, let alone this doppelganger. Wei Wuyin smiled eerily. Immediately, the three of them attacked. Suddenly, the 9 golden dragons collapsed. The perfect sacred body groaned, and his face was slightly pale. However, the moment the 9 dragons shattered, Zhuowen's sacred body jumped directly into the endless abyss behind him. He could feel that his original body was about to come up. Where are you going? The three of them chased closely. However, not long after the three of them rushed into the cave, the terrifying vibration became more and more violent. It made the three of them stop, and they didn't dare to chase. Konglian Shiren frowned and said, maybe what this guy said is right. I'm afraid something big has happened down there. Let's go quickly. The first corpse king and Wei Wuyin looked at each other and nodded. The attack just now was enough to seriously injure Zhuowen's doppelganger. If he fell to the bottom of the abyss, he would probably die. The three of them didn't need to go into the abyss and take the risk. However, just as the three of them were about to leave the abyss, a gust of wind roared. This gust of wind swept up Zhuowen's sacred body, and Zhuowen's original body looked extremely cold. He stared coldly at Wei Wuyin and the others. The three of them naturally saw Zhuowen and the master of the tomb god in the gust of wind. Their faces suddenly stiffened, and they knew something was wrong. Originally, the three of them thought that Zhuowen's original body would let the master of the tomb god kill the three of them. However, they found that the gust of wind swept past them without stopping. What's going on? He didn't attack us. Konglian Shiren said in surprise. Humph. That Zhuowen is just a celestial immortal. How could he have the ability to order the master of the tomb god to attack? The first corpse king sneered. Wei Wuyin nodded in agreement. When he was about to speak, suddenly, a giant claw stretched out. Wei Wuyin directly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Konglian Shiren and the first corpse king's pupils shrank. When they were about to shout and retreat, the giant claw directly penetrated their bodies. The two of them died without a sound. Chapter 1861. Lava devour. The wind howled, instantly taking Zhuowen, the lord of the divine tomb, and the others away from the Khaki planet. However, not long after Zhuowen's group left, the abyss under the Khaki planet suddenly burst open, forming a huge hole that covered 1/5 of the entire planet. From within this gigantic hole, that gigantic claw stretched out. With a gentle wave, the yellow planet crumbled. The countless immortal crystals within the planet scattered out in all directions, exploding into balls of dense immortal chi one after another. The immortal energy was so dense that it almost formed a terrifying hurricane, spreading in all directions like angry dragons. After the khaki-colored planet crumbled, a huge exotic beast slowly emerged from the countless fragments of the planet. Zhuowen's eyes fell on the strange beast, and his pupils shrank. He found that this strange beast's appearance was very similar to the adult devourer in the outside world. It also had 12 long horns, but its size was much smaller than the adult devourer. Although Zhuowen didn't know much about devour, He knew that this strange beast in front of him was the lava devourer that Sungjia had mentioned. It was also the next generation of the adult devourer. At this moment, the jade deity humanoid bird-shaped magic tool hovered quietly above Devour's head. Streams of jade-colored light poured into Devour's body from the magic tool. Devour's eyes revealed a comfortable look. Then, it opened its mouth and sucked, swallowing the magic tool. Zhuowen stared at the jade deity humanoid bird-shaped magic tool. He thought of the god lord, Do Hua, who was holding the magic tool. He knew that Do Hua was probably like what Yang Yi had said. The moment he entered the Khaki planet, he became a sacrifice for the lava devourer. Devourer indifferently glanced at Zhuowen's group in the distance. Then, 8 vortexes suddenly appeared on its body. Each of these 8 vortexes was as big as several planets, and they were arranged in 8 directions around Devourer. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 8 extremely terrifying suction forces came from the 8 vortexes. Then, the surrounding planets began to sway. The nearby planets involuntarily flew toward the vortexes, disappearing into them. This guy is swallowing the planets in the adult Devourer's body. This devouring power is too terrifying. Let's go. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum's face changed slightly. He waved his sleeve, and the wind around him became even more terrifying. Then, it swept toward the wound on the adult Devourer's body. The infant Devourer lay quietly in the center of the 8 vortexes. Of course, it saw the group of the Master of the Divine Tomb running away. A gleam of disdain and ridicule crossed its eyes, but it didn't chase after them. Instead, it observed quietly. At this moment, hundreds of millions of feet away from the infant Devourer, Dong Fangxian and Ji Wubing were flying silently. When they approached a blue planet in front of them, they were shocked to find that the planet was shaking violently. Then, the huge planet was like a ball that was thrown out and swept behind them. At the same time, an unimaginably terrifying suction force instantly descended upon the two of them. What kind of power is this? Why is the suction force so terrifying? Ji Wubing's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He growled and exerted all his strength, spreading powerful celestial core power under his feet to resist the suction force coming from behind him. Dong Fangxian, who was beside him, did the same. But even though they tried their best, they still found that they were constantly being pushed back, and as the suction force grew stronger and stronger, the speed of their retreat became faster and faster. Whoosh! Suddenly, a huge planet appeared in front of the two of them. The planet was charging straight at them. No! Ji Wubing and Dong Fangxian roared in a low voice. Their celestial core power spread in front of them, hoping to resist the incoming planet. Poochie! The planet slammed into them, and the two of them spat out a mouthful of blood. The celestial core power in front of them dissipated, and coupled with the suction force behind them, the two of them were sent flying. The speed of the planet was beyond their imagination. Soon, the two of them were sucked into one of the vortexes around Devourer. This scene was naturally seen by Zhuo Wen, who was wrapped in gales nearby. A trace of gloominess immediately appeared in his eyes. The pressure that the infant Devourer gave him was too great. Even the Master of the Divine Tomb seemed to be somewhat afraid of this infant Devourer. This was just a young Devourer. If he grew up, wouldn't his strength be even more terrifying? At this moment, Zhuowen and the Lord of the Divine Tomb were getting closer and closer to the entrance. Zhuowen could even see the scar in front of them. As long as they reached the scar, they would be able to leave this void completely. Awoo! Suddenly, Devourer, who was lying lazily in the middle of the 8 vortexes, slowly narrowed his eyes. Then, he craned his neck and let out a clear roar. Next, Zhuowen saw several planets coming over from not far away, blocking their way. The Lord of the Divine Tomb coldly snorted and said, "You guys go first. I'll stop these planets." After saying that, the Lord of the Divine Tomb leaped up. As he leaped up, his body constantly expanded, turning into the size of a planet in the blink of an eye. True scripture of obliteration. The Lord of the Divine Tomb fiercely punched out. Instantly, his right fist was surrounded by a powerful force of obliteration. When the fist hit the planet, countless cracks appeared on its surface. Although the Lord of the Divine Tomb could only exert the power of a demigod, which wasn't enough to destroy a planet, the planet inside Devaur's body was much weaker than a normal planet like the heavenly armor star. After all, Devour had been devouring the planet's energy for many years, so there wasn't much left. That was why the Lord of the Divine Tomb could resist these planets. However, it wasn't easy for the Lord of the Divine Tomb. While the Lord of the Divine Tomb was blocking the planets, Zhuowen and the others were rushing toward the entrance with irresistible force. However, when Zhuowen and the others were about to reach the entrance, the mocking look in the young Devour's eyes became thicker. Devour opened his mouth and sucked. The 8 vortexes around him immediately merged into a giant vortex that looked like a black hole. A suction force that was many times stronger than before spread out in the entire void. Countless planets scattered around this void began to rotate clockwise, moving toward the giant vortex where Devour was. Their speed was many times faster than before. Seeing the entrance close at hand and the suction force doubling, Zhuowen could only watch the entrance move away from him. The Lord of the Divine Tomb swung his arms, shaking off the planets that were blocking his way. Then, he came to the place where Zhuowen and the others were. However, the suction force was so terrifying that even the Lord of the Divine Tomb couldn't resist it. The gusts of wind didn't move forward, but moved away from the entrance. "What should we do now?" asked Zhuowen with a frown. The Lord of the Divine Tomb was a little reluctant. He shook his head and said, "I've tried my best. Unfortunately, Devour's suction force is too terrifying." For the time being, the atmosphere became silent. Zhuowen's eyes sparkled. He gritted his teeth, preparing to use the power Tsungjie had given him. However, when he was about to take out the Fushi cauldron and used Tsungjie's power, a sigh arose around him. This old man is still one step behind. After he finished speaking, Zhuowen and the others felt the world spin around them. Then, they disappeared from the void. Devour, who was happily absorbing the planets around, showed a cold gleam in his eyes. He roared and accelerated the absorption of the planets around him. In the dim hall, countless black veins were moving freely. Deep inside the hall, a lonely figure was sitting on a throne. In the center of the hall, the dim candlelight became dimmer. The moment the candlelight dimmed, the space above was distorted. Then, several figures descended. These figures were Zhuowen, the Lord of the Divine Tomb, Shiji, and the first mountain god. Zhuowen looked around. Then, he came to the throne and said respectfully, "Predecessor Tsungjie." The first mountain god nodded to Tsungjie with a calm face. As for the Lord of the Divine Tomb, he shivered. He hurried to the throne and said excitedly, "Master, I finally see you again." Shiji originally had a bewildered expression, but when he heard how Zhuowen addressed him, his expression shook, and he followed closely behind the Divine Tomb Master. However, after seeing Tsungjie's appearance, Shiji couldn't help but take a deep breath. At this moment, Tsungjie looked neither like a human nor a ghost. He couldn't associate him with the valiant Tsungjie from before. "Predecessor Tsungjie, what's going on? Didn't you ask me to bring Devour's infant back? Why did you stop me?" Zhuowen asked confusedly. Tsungjie shook his head. "It's useless now. Devour's infant body has hatched. Even if you use that power, you can't suppress it. Initially, Devour's infant body hadn't hatched yet. I didn't expect that Yang Yi would destroy it. I'm afraid Yang Yi's purpose was to hatch Devour and kill my hope of getting out of here. Moreover, I already knew Yang Yi's identity. I didn't expect it to be him." Speaking of this, Tsungjie's mouth was filled with bitterness. He had calculated everything, but he had missed Yang Yi. At first, he didn't care much about Yang Yi. However, at the most critical moment, Yang Yi had destroyed all his plans. "Who's Yang Yi?" asked Zhuowen. "If I'm not wrong, he should be the son of God Ganji. He has calculated everything. His purpose is to prevent me from escaping. Another purpose is to take Devour's infant body for himself. Anyway, Devour's infant body is much weaker than the adult Devour. With the power of the God of Heaven, he could subdue Devour," said Tsungjie indifferently. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. If Yang Yi was like what Tsungjie said, he was too cunning. In fact, Yang Yi had calculated everything a long time ago. Chapter 1862. Sungjie's anomaly. In a massive underground cave world, the adult Devour's body was lying quietly on top of the cast cave. If one observed carefully, they could see that Devour's body, which was like an empty space, was slowly shrinking. The twinkling stars in his body dimmed, and their number was decreasing. As the stars in Devour's body dimmed, his aura became weaker, as if he could fall at any minute. Below Devour, on a massive stone platform, a petite figure lifted her head, looking at the anomaly in Devour's body. Her eyes were solemn as she sighed and muttered, "I shouldn't have stepped into this muddy water, Tianwei." Suddenly, a faint voice came from behind the petite figure. Then, the petite figure trembled and turned around abruptly. She saw Yang Yi, who was wearing a black brocade robe, looking at her with a smile on his face. Behind Yang Yi, Sky Worm, who had transformed into a muscular man, grinned at the petite figure in front of him. This petite figure was none other than Yang Tianwei, who had left the khaki-colored planet earlier. Yang Tianwei had the divination holy talisman, so she had foreseen the danger on the khaki-colored planet. That was why she had avoided the disaster caused by Devour. Yang Tianwei gazed at Yang Yi, frowning. She couldn't help but take a few steps back. She looked at Yang Yi vigilantly, asking in a low voice, "Brother Yang Yi, when did you get out?" Yang Yi smiled faintly, "Not long ago." Then, Yang Yi flicked his finger, throwing a mass of white light to Yang Tianwei. "This is the sea of consciousness of the Chaos Temple's ancient. Check his memory and find the way to break the immortal godlocking formation." Receiving the mass of white light, Yang Tianwei furrowed her brows. She didn't like the way Yang Yi treated her as his subordinate. However, she was also very clear that Yang Yi was very strong. With her strength, there was no way she could compete with him. "Don't worry. I won't break my promise to you. I'm giving you the revolving thorn holy talisman now." Yang Yi looked at Yang Tianwei indifferently, then pointed with his right finger. Suddenly, a black vortex appeared at the tip of his finger. The black vortex wriggled and finally turned into a black talisman. Receiving the revolving stab Saint rune, Yang Tianwei's expression softened. He nodded and said, "I will take a look at the method to break the indestructible godlock array. However, I need a quiet place right now." Yang Yi smiled faintly and said, "That's not a problem. Let's go to the space where God Ganj is. It's a separate space that I have isolated with the power of the void." As he spoke, Yang Tianwei waved his sleeve. Immediately, the power of the void swept out from his sleeve. Immediately, a ring-shaped independent void space appeared in front of Yang Tianwei. Yang Tianwei nodded and brought the revolving thorn saint talisman and Jiu Gu's sea of consciousness into the space. Then, Yang Yi kept the space in his sleeve. Then, Yang Yi's eyes fell on Devour's closed left eye as he said faintly, "Old Sungjie, you think I don't know where you are? The reason why I got into Devour's body earlier was to numb him. I've brought forward the hatching time of Devour's lava. I'm afraid that old man Sungjie has already known my identity. Anyway, it's not a big deal. It's time for me to settle the old score. That old man wanted to use the power of the strongest parasite to backfire on Devour. Did he think it was that easy? In the end, he didn't look like a human or a ghost. What a joke." Tian Jiu grinned and said, "Sir, you're really wise. That old man Sungjie's ambition isn't small. However, Devour is one of the strongest races in the starry sky. How could an aboriginal backfire on him just like that? Moreover, since Sir has hatched Devour's lava, it should be easy to tame it." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "It's not that simple. Even though it's just hatched, it's not easy to tame it. Moreover, when it starts to absorb the energy of Devour, it will become stronger. At that time, it won't be easy to tame it." Tian Jiu was a little puzzled. Then, why did Sir let the lava absorb the energy of Devour? Isn't it disadvantageous to tame Devour? Yang Yi said indifferently, "Because the lava has swallowed the Jade Godman's bird-shaped magic tool. That thing's attack power is really terrifying. However, that's not the most important feature of this magic tool. The most important feature of this magic tool is that it can control the creature it worships to a certain extent. I used the god lord Do Hua as a sacrifice to Devour's lava. Moreover, I've brought forward the hatching time of Devour to control it. However, it's not easy to control a powerful creature like Devour. Even with the help of the Jade Godman's bird-shaped magic tool, I'm afraid I can only affect Devour's lava a little. I can't really control it. Then, Yang Yi looked at Devour's left eye and said, perhaps you don't know that the power of the strongest parasite in Tsungje's body comes from Devour. By letting Devour hatch and absorb Devour's energy, I'm actually suppressing that old man's power. Listening to Yang Yi's explanation, Tiangu's eyes turned cold. His respect for Yang Yi increased. However, Yang Yi was mysterious and unfathomable. Moreover, he was powerful. His scheming was enough to make Tian Chong willingly submit to him. At the same time, Heavenly Insect recalled that time. Although Heavenly God Ganji had called Yang Yi his son, Heavenly Insect was keenly aware that his master, Ganji, actually held a respectful attitude toward this so-called son. This kind of respectful attitude wasn't like a father facing his own child. It was more like a subordinate facing a superior. That was why Tian Jiyu obeyed Yang Yi's orders. He didn't even dare to disobey. You go and dig out Devour's left eye. Tsungjie, Zhuo Wen, and the others should be in there, said Yang Yi indifferently. Tiangu's pupils shrank. He was a little scared. Sir, it's an adult Devour. Do you think it will wake him up if I dig out his eye? Don't worry. The adult Devour is already an arrow at the end of its flight. Moreover, the infant Devour has been born. Logically speaking, it should be on the verge of death. Moreover, the adult Devour's eyes have been blinded since we entered this place. You'll be fine even if you dig out its left eye. Anyway, we need to be careful of Tsungjie. He's been in Devour's body for a long time. I don't know how far he has fused with the strongest parasite, said Yang Yi in a low voice. Tian Jiyu nodded. Then, the black mist on his body burst out. Tian Jiyu dashed out, revealing his true form. His 12 arms looked ferocious and intimidating. Although Tiangu's body was big enough, he was still small compared to Devour's adult body. He was just as big as Devour's eyes. Boom! Tiangu's attack fell on Devour's left eye. Then, people in the hall immediately felt the hall shake violently. Someone is attacking the outside of the hall, said the master of the divine tomb. It's Tian Jiyu. Tsungjie's eyes were cold and gloomy. Seems like he wants to dig out the left eye of this hall. But, it's not that easy. Then, countless black veins around the hall became crazy. Then, the bulges around the hall burst. From the bursting bulges, people with cold eyes walked out. They all had a strange beast mark on their glabella, which was similar to Kong Wen and the black and white giant. However, the strange beast mark on their glabella was dark purple. Their auras could be compared to the black and white giant. Altogether, 12 people walked out of the hall. They came to the throne, bowed their heads respectfully, and said in a low voice, "Master, destroy the intruders," said Tsungjie indifferently. The 12 people nodded slightly. Then, they rushed out and left the hall. Zhuowen looked at the 12 people leaving and frowned slightly. Book Immortal Kong Wen, whom he had met before, had mentioned Master, and these people also called Tsungjie Master. It seemed that the real master of the strange beast mark on their glabella was Tsungjie in front of him. Haha, they all fell in the war with the god of heaven 10,000 years ago. Later, when I was sealed here by the strongest parasite, I tried many methods. Finally, I found a way to let other parasites enter the corpses and let them continue to live, explained Tsungjie with a faint smile. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Although they have been resurrected, they are no different from the living dead, right? They are no longer what they used to be, but living dead without souls. Speaking of this, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. However, Tsungjie didn't care. He smiled and said, "Little guy, maybe you don't know that this parasite does have the risk of being possessed. However, once you can control this parasite, you can gain a lot of power." At that time, I had no choice. If I hadn't fallen into the deep underground and been trapped here, I wouldn't have been possessed by Devour's strongest parasite. Anyway, I've been living like this for 10,000 years, and I've gained tremendous power. Zhuoan looked at Tsungjie deeply and said in a low voice, "Didn't you say that you don't have much time left? Since Devour has hatched in advance, how can we help you now?" Chapter 1863. Heaven devouring eye. Seeing the candlelight that was about to go out, Zhuoan's pupils involuntarily shrank, and a bad feeling rose in his heart. But soon, he regained his composure, and said to Tsungjie with a smile, "Senior, congratulations for successfully suppressing the strongest parasite. But Yang Yi and Tian Jiyu are both very powerful, and it's possible that the God of War spear is also in Yang Yi's hands. Once the God of War spear escapes, I'm afraid the situation will become extremely troublesome. Although the 12 people you sent out are strong, I'm afraid it's not enough to deal with Yang Yi and Tian Jiyu. Why don't you let us go out and help?" The Master of the Divine Tomb and Shiji nodded in agreement. The Master of the Divine Tomb said respectfully, "Master, Zhuoan is right. Yang Yi and Tian Jiyu are both very powerful. Those 12 people are indeed not enough." On the other hand, the first mountain god frowned slightly. He had once entered the palace just like Zhuowen. Now, like Zhuowen, he also found that the current Tsungjie was very different from the previous Tsungjie. Both his tone and attitude were completely different from before. Of course, with his observation, he naturally noticed that the floating candlelight in the center of the hall had reached the end of its road, and he secretly became vigilant. It was the first time that the Master of the Divine Tomb and Shiji had entered this place. Although they also noticed the candlelight in the hall, they did not care too much about it, so they did not have the same doubts as Zhuoan and the first mountain god. "Haha, it's good that you have this intention, but your strength is still not enough, especially Shiji. His cultivation has fallen from the peak of the true immortal realm to the middle of the true immortal realm. Although Fushi has Cao Yu's demigod body and can barely exert demigod power, the price is too great, and Zhuoan's cultivation is not enough. If you really want to help me, I have a way to temporarily increase your strength. If your strength increases, it will be of great help to me," Tsungjie said with a smile. The Master of the Divine Tomb looked respectful, and said in a deep voice, "Master, what is it?" Tsungjie smiled and waved his right hand. Suddenly, 8 black bulges appeared behind him. The black bulges pulsed gently, as if they were hearts. Then, the bulges exploded one after another, and 8 black shadows rushed out. The 8 shadows surrounded Tsungjie and were about the size of a finger. Looking carefully, they were very similar to the mark between Tsungjie's eyebrows. Zhuoan narrowed his eyes. These 8 shadows were exactly the same as the exotic beast that had crawled out from Zhonbai's forehead. It was just that the exotic beast back then was much larger than these newly born parasites. "This is a parasite larva. It's a species that I've refined over the years. As long as this parasite larva enters your body, your strength will multiply. Shiji, you will be able to return to the pinnacle of the true immortal stage. As for Fushi, you will be able to completely consolidate your power as a demigod. As for Zhuoan, you will be able to advance to the true immortal stage. As for you, the first mountain god, you will also obtain the power of a demigod," Tsungjie said with a faint smile. Shiji narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice, "Is this thing safe? Once it's implanted between my eyebrows, won't it destroy my sea of consciousness?" Tsungjie chuckled and said, "Don't worry. This is a larva that I've specially refined. It's not like those failed parasites that enter corpses. It will only increase your strength unilaterally. It will have absolutely no effect on your sea of consciousness and spiritual intelligence." Although Shiji had some doubts in his heart, he just nodded and did not raise any objections due to his trust in Tsungjie. As for the Master of the Tomb God, he remained silent and did not speak. "The 8 of you should relax and don't resist. Only in this way, the larva will successfully enter your body and increase your strength." With that, Tsungjie waved his sleeve. The 8 larvae roared and rushed toward the Master of the Tomb God, Shiji, and Zhuoan. "Everyone, step back. This is not Senior Tsungjie. The real Senior Tsungjie has probably been completely possessed by the strongest parasite." Zhuoan suddenly transmitted his voice to everyone. Then, He took a step forward and immediately threw out the mysterious eyeball that was still playing dead in his collar. The black lightning produced by the mysterious eyeball was extremely effective against the parasite. Therefore, he threw the mysterious eyeball out immediately. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The mysterious eyeball hissed unhappily. However, it soon noticed the 8 parasitic larvae in front of it, and a greedy look appeared in its eyes. The eyeball blinked and immediately shot out 8 black lightning bolts toward the 8 parasitic larvae. When the 8 black lightning bolts covered the 8 parasitic larvae, the 8 parasitic larvae made a strange sizzling sound and then collapsed. Then, the 8 lightning bolts returned to the mysterious eyeball. Tsungjie's pupils shrank. He stared at the mysterious eyeball in front of him with a trace of uncertainty. He said in a low voice, "The heaven-devouring eye? Wasn't it taken from Devour's body and refined by God Ganji? Why is it in your body?" Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered, but his heart skipped a beat. It seemed that the strongest parasite of the mysterious eyeball knew something about its origins. However, Zhuo Wen would not be so stupid as to reveal how he obtained the mysterious eyeball. The master of the tomb of the god of sin and Shiji looked extremely gloomy. They also realized that Tsungjie was really possessed by the strongest parasite, as Zhuo Wen said. After all, the 8 larvae just now gave them a strange sense of crisis. If they really let the larvae enter their glabella, as Tsungjie said, they would be in real danger. "Master," Fushi sighed softly. "We have to leave this place as soon as possible." Zhuowen took out the blood-splashing 5 steps and looked at Tsungjie, who was sitting on the throne in front of him with a complicated expression. The memory of Tsungjie passing on the bloody 5 steps to him was still vivid in his mind. Not long after, Tsungjie's mind was not clear, and he was completely controlled by the strongest parasite. "Leave. This hall is under my control. Without my permission, don't even think about going anywhere. It just so happens that you've also sent the heaven-devouring eye over. I'll devour it as well. Perhaps it can even increase my strength, haha." On the throne, Tsungjie looked up to the sky and laughed. His eyes were full of ridicule. Then the whole hall began to shake. The dense black veins on the surface of the hall rushed out and gathered toward Zhuowen from all directions. A terrifying momentum as vast as Mount Tai filled the whole hall. Hiss, hiss. The mysterious eyeball suddenly buzzed and its pupils shrank. Suddenly, black lightning rushed out from the center of its pupils. As soon as the black lightning appeared, it scattered and turned into dense black electric wires. These dense black electric wires radiated out. The black veins in front of them exploded into masses of black blood. However, the number of black veins was extremely terrifying. They were densely packed and came from all directions. The mysterious eyeball only defended the black veins in one direction. The black veins in the other 3 directions rushed toward Zhuowen and the master of the tomb god. The master of the tomb god shouted angrily. He spread his arms and used the shattering scripture. He was responsible for the black veins on the left. The first mountain god stood behind to resist the black veins behind him. Zhuowen, Shiji, and the 4 genuine immortal Dao soldiers were on the right, barely resisting the black veins. Slash. Zhuowen slowly pulled out the iron sword from the blood splatter 5 steps. Suddenly, a fierce aura filled the scabbard. When Zhuowen pulled out the first sword, the tip of the iron sword emitted a blazing sword light. This sword light lit up the whole hall. As soon as the sword was pulled out, the sword light flashed. Countless black veins on the right instantly collapsed. Its power was even comparable to the black lightning at the mysterious eyeball. Shiji was dumbfounded. He stared at the scabbard in Zhuowen's hand and could not help but exclaim, "Blood splatter 5 steps? Zhonbai's substandard god weapon blood splatter 5 step. Now is not the time to be surprised. Let's leave this place quickly." Zhuowen's eyes were serious. The yellow springs water droplets in his body rushed out and formed a constantly rotating gate of reincarnation in the air. The gate of reincarnation suddenly opened. Zhuowen said to Shiji and the 4 genuine immortal Dao soldiers, "You guys go in quickly. This gate of reincarnation has a teleportation array that can lead to the outside world." Shi and the 4 genuine immortal Dao soldiers looked at each other, then directly rushed into the gate of reincarnation. First Mountain God and Senior Fushi, you guys go in as well. Zhuowen suddenly swung out the second sword. A crescent-shaped sword light shot out. The moment this sword light shot out, it instantly formed thousands of sword lights. They were like stars in the night sky, constantly flashing. The black veins in front of the First Mountain God all collapsed. The First Mountain God took a deep look at Zhuowen, then nodded and entered the gate of reincarnation as well. On the other side, the Lord of the Divine Tomb, Fushi, let out a furious roar. The coffin embedded in the forehead of the stone statue directly separated. The huge stone statue directly exploded. The terrifying explosion immediately stopped the black veins in front of it. Fushi's coffin also took advantage of this opening to fly out and enter the gate of reincarnation. Let's go. At this moment, Zhuowen swung out the third sword. At this moment, in the air above Zhuowen's head, an extremely huge illusory sword appeared. This illusory sword was like a tombstone, floating above his head. Zhuowen's face was pale and bloodless. A mouthful of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The blood splatter 5 steps was a sub-god weapon. Every time he pulled out the sword, the burden on Zhuowen was extremely heavy. The first sword injured Zhuowen's body. The second sword injured him to a rather serious extent. The third sword even made Zhuowen feel like his body was about to collapse. It was unbearable. However, the power of the third sword was indeed terrifying. The illusory sword floated around Zhuowen like a real tombstone, protecting Zhuowen. The surrounding black veins rushed over, but they were blocked by the illusory sword. Whoosh! At this moment, the mysterious eyeball also rushed over and went back into Zhuowen's collar. However, the aura of the mysterious eyeball was a little chaotic. It was obvious that it was not easy for it to block the black veins. Let's go. Zhuowen took a step forward and stepped into the gate of reincarnation. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.